Good morning. I'll play this for you. Enjoy the stream. I'll let this play for you.
All right, so are we ready for the jury?
Yes.
Okay. All right, be seated. Your next witness?
We call Ron Schnell.
Okay.
Schnell.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case and penalty of law?
Yes.
All right.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
I'm Ron Schnell.
And what is your current job title, Mr. Schnell?
I'm a director at Berkely Research Group.
And could you briefly describe your educational background since high school?
I have a master's degree in computer science.
Do you have an undergraduate degree?
I do not.
And can you explain to the jury why not?
When I was a kid, there was a lot of publicity about me because I was a professor at NYU. When I was 14, NYU actually offered me to go into their freshman class when I was 14, but I decided that I wanted to experience the social aspect of high school, so I turned them down, but by the time I got to college, they skipped me from undergraduate to graduate.
So when did you receive your master's degree from Syracuse University?
It wasn't until 2008, actually.
And why wasn't it until 2008?
So because of my previous background while I was at Syracuse, including I did work at MIT in the artificial intelligence lab for the two founders of artificial intelligence, Patrick Winston and Marvin Minsky. I was immediately lured to industry even while I was in graduate school, and eventually they offer you enough money where you have to take them up on it.
So when you were lured away from Syracuse University, what did you do?
I worked at Bell Labs on something called the Unix operating system. Unix is an operating system, which is the core of the computer, what makes everything work. Microsoft Windows is an operating system. Mac OS is an operating system. You may have heard of Linux, which is, Unix was the predecessor to Linux. So I worked on the kernel of the Unix operating system at Bell Labs.
And when was that approximately? What year?
1986.
And how long did you work at Bell Labs?
A couple of years.
And what did you do after Bell Labs?
After that, I was lured away to IBM. So I worked at IBM on their version of the Unix operating system, which was called AIX, also working on the kernel and managing other programmers working on the kernel.
And can you just briefly explain what the kernel is?
Right, the kernel is the center of the operating system, so it actually controls the piece of software that controls the whole computer. So it gets down to the bit level where it's actually really, everything that goes on the computer has to go through the kernel.
And what did you do after IBM?
After IBM, I founded a startup company.
What was the name of that startup company?
It was called Secure Online Systems.
And what did Secure Online Systems do?
It was a company that wrote software for mainframe computers running various versions of the Unix operating system.
And were there any other investors in Secure Online Systems, Inc.?
Yeah, my business partner in that was Sylvester Stallone.
And what eventually happened to Secure Online Systems?
Well, it was, as I said, a software product that ran on mainframe computers running Unix. And we actually completed the product and it ran very well, but mainframes running Unix kind of ceased to exist back then, so we had to shut it down.
So what did you do after the company shut down?
Then I went to work at Sun Microsystems, working on their version of Unix, which is called Solaris, also working on the kernel.
And approximately how long were you there at Sun?
Approximately 5 years.
And did you also work for Drivers Aces, Inc.?
Right. Coincident with that, I also founded another startup called Driver Aces, and we wrote what are called device drivers to run on the Unix operating systems. A device driver actually teaches the computer how to talk to hardware devices, so it also runs within the kernel.
Have you founded any other startups?
Yes.
And what was the other startup? What was at least one of the other startups?
So the last startup I founded was called mailcall.com, M-A-I-L, and that was a startup that allowed you to read and manage your email on your cellular phone before there were smartphones. So a computerized voice would read you your email and you could speak a reply into the phone or send it to a fax machine, basically let you manage your email on the road.
And what happened to mailcall.com?
I sold that to a public company in 2000.
And what did you do after that?
After that, I ended up working at Equifax, one of the 3 credit bureaus in the United States, running software development for their internet marketing division.
And how long were you in that position?
Until 2005.
And what happened in 2005?
In 2005, I was asked to run what's called a monitorship for the DC District Court for 2 cases, U.S. versus Microsoft and New York et al. Versus Microsoft, the 2 largest antitrust cases in U.S. history. So I was responsible for running that organization. I hired 93 people over 6.5 years to perform that monitorship.
And what type of work were you doing in that monitorship?
Highly technical work, looking at all of Microsoft's documents and source code and things like that. I can't talk too much about it because of a protective order, but I had special master powers in those matters.
And you said you were in that position for 6.5 years?
Correct.
So that takes us to about 2013, is that right?
It was 11.
2011, okay. And what did you do? What did you do in 2011?
In 2011, I didn't do much until 2013 when I took the role as a director at Berkely Research Group.
Okay, and that's your current position, correct?
Correct.
And what are your responsibilities at Berkely Research Group?
So I do all sorts of things. Generally, I consult. I do software projects and manage software projects and architect them. But I also do things like this, where I'm consulting in litigation and sometimes testifying in litigation.
Have you taught any courses?
Yes, I'm an adjunct professor at Nova Southeastern University.
And what classes do you teach there?
I teach computer security and the Unix operating system environment, although since COVID I haven't been doing that.
And have you published any scholarly articles?
Yes, I have 2 published articles, one related to computer security and another relating to antitrust enforcement using technology.
And what experience do you have in statistical or forensic analysis of social media?
A bunch of the consulting work I've done involves analyzing data from social media. Most of them have been consulting for litigation. Some of them are consulting for non-litigation. Yeah.
And is that work both in civil and criminal matters?
Yes.
And could you describe the work just a bit more in terms of what you've performed regarding statistical or forensic analysis of social media?
I can't talk about the specific cases because I haven't testified on them, and some of them are awaiting indictment, most likely. But in general, it's really the same sort of stuff I've been doing here, analyzing data from the social networks.
And what social media platforms have you performed forensic analysis?
All of the major ones.
What are the major ones?
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit.
How much of your expert work is for plaintiffs versus work for defendants?
Well, I don't consider myself working for either plaintiff or defendant. I take my role as an independent expert extremely seriously. But looking at whose counsel has hired me over the 9 or so years I've been doing this, it's almost exactly equal.
And how many times have you been a consulting expert?
Including litigation and non-litigation, hundreds.
How many times have you been qualified in court, arbitration, or in sworn court testimony to provide expert testimony?
8 times.
Have you ever been disqualified as an expert by a court?
No.
Do you believe that your testimony will be helpful in assisting the jury understand the facts of this case?
I do.
Your Honor, at this time, I tender Mr. Schnell as an expert in the fields of statistical and forensic analysis of social media.
Any objection?
Your Honor, can we be heard?
Do you want to voir dire?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can voir dire.
Thanks. Sir, my name's Wayne Edison. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You made here an analysis of certain tweets and hashtags, right?
Right.
And you made no effort to connect those tweets and hashtags to the statements being made by Adam Waldman.
I'll sustain the objection. The voir dire is just for his qualifications as an expert.
Can we be heard, Your Honor?
If you want to come forward.
Thank you.
That's fine. All right. So, Mr. Dennison, do you have any objection to him moving in as an expert?
No.
All right. Then I'll move him in as an expert in statistical and forensic analysis of social media. Okay? Yes, sir, your question.
Mr. Schnell, what were you asked to do in this matter?
So I was asked to do several things. I used the official Twitter APIs to bring in data over several different time spans. Initially, it was April of 2020 to January of 2021, and analyzed various hashtags and things like that.
And what is significant about April 2020?
I understand that April 2020 is related to the alleged defamatory statements by Mr. Waldman.
And you talked about APIs. What is it? What does that mean?
API stands for Application Programming Interface. That is a service that's provided by companies like Twitter so that professionals can write programs to query Twitter to ask for various things. In this case, I use two of their APIs. One of them is called the Search API, and that allows you to give search terms, and it will return all the tweets containing those search terms through a certain date range. The other one is called Accounts API, and I use that, again, through a certain date range to return any tweet that contained that hashtag. And I should add that it may not be obvious why you need to do this, but if you just do a search on Twitter itself, it's not going to return everything. It's going to return a subset of what is out there. But using these APIs, which you pay a lot of money for, they sort of guarantee that you'll almost guarantee that you'll get everything.
And you mentioned hashtags. I know a lot of people know what those are, but for those who don't know, what's a hashtag?
Well, hashtags are a function of Twitter. They're really just part of the text of a tweet or a profile, and it's convenient to put things in hashtags so that when somebody searches, they can search for a particular hashtag and it'll come up.
And did you choose particular hashtags to search for?
I did.
And how did you choose which hashtags to use?
Well, initially I was looking at tweets that would be negative towards Ms. Heard. So I looked through tweets that were negative towards Ms. Heard, and I found that a supermajority of them were using one of four different hashtags.
And so overall, what did your analysis find regarding negative hashtags about Ms. Heard from April 2020 until the end of January 2021?
Well, there were over 1,243,000 and change uses of those hashtags during that time frame you just mentioned.
And did you perform an analysis of the negative hashtags from April 2020 until January 2022?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result of that?
There were over another million, so 2.38 million, I think.
And how did you determine that the tweets were negative about Ms. Heard?
Well, I hadn't been asked that until later on in this, but I didn't think that would be in controversy. I mean, some of these hashtags are pretty rude, and it would really surprise me that anyone would think that they wouldn't be negative towards Ms. Heard. But when I was asked about it later, I actually took a random sampling and looked at them and could not find any that were not negative towards Ms. Heard.
And what was the random sampling that you used?
I did two of them. They were 1,000 each.
And how did you determine which 1,000 tweets to use to review in each search?
I wrote a program that truly selected them at random.
And in your experience, is 2,000 tweets a meaningful sample?
If they're chosen at random in this universe, yes.
Okay. In addition to the four hashtags for Ms. Heard, did you review any other? Did you look at any other hashtags?
I did.
And what type of hashtags did you look for?
I looked at what I found to be 6 hashtags that would be negative towards Mr. Depp.
Okay, but Michelle, could you put up demonstrative 1, which is on the 5th page of attachment 4 of Mr. Schnell's expert designation. Mr. Schnell, did you create this chart?
I did.
And what data is this chart based on?
This is based on the search API from Twitter, and it rolls up the number of tweets with the various hashtags by month of these 2 years. 3 years.
Your Honor, I'd like to make this a demonstrative Schnell demonstrative 1, or do you want it to be a?
If I could get it one of the numbers, since it's going to be part of the record, just.
Okay. Can we call it Schnell demonstrative 1, and then I will give you a number?
The last number I have is 1837. I don't know.
Do we know if that's the last? Can we make it? How about we make it 1900? That way, it's not Can we just make it 1900?
That's perfect.
Okay.
All right, 1900 it is. Any objection to demonstrative?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can publish that.
And is this the chart you made, Mr. Schnell?
It is.
Okay. And at the top here, there are hashtags that are in yellow. You see that?
I do.
Okay. And if we go all the way to the right, well, first let's scroll over to the left here. I apologize. You see, in 2020, there's the months of June and July.
I do.
Okay. And what are these columns? First, tell the jury what they represent.
So each of these is the number of tweets with the hashtags, with the corresponding hashtag during that month.
Okay. And if we look at the first one in yellow, you see that first hashtag, the fourth one over?
I do.
And are there any, what does it show from 2018, frankly, to July of 2020?
There were none.
And then what happens in August of 2020?
Well, there's a remarkable jump from July to August of 2020. It goes from 0 to 13,878.
And if we scroll to the right, the last three hashtags, which are highlighted, or shows the difference between June and July, what did your analysis show?
Well, you can see that June is about at its steady state. In July, there's also a remarkable jump.
And that's for all three of those hashtags?
That's correct.
Okay. And the hashtags, if the hashtags that are in blue are the ones related to Mr. Depp, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Oh, by the way, what is your understanding of when the last alleged defamatory statement was made by Mr. Depp through Mr. Waldman?
My understanding is that it was the end of June of that year.
Of 2020?
Yes.
Now, looking at the hashtags that are highlighted in blue for Mr. Depp, for the months of November and December of 2018 and January of 2019, what does your analysis show?
Well, I see a remarkable jump in November of 2018, and then it starts to, well, it goes way down in December of 18 and in January of 19.
And do you know when Ms. Heard wrote the op-ed in this matter?
My understanding is that it was December of 2018.
And if we go to November of 2020 for the hashtags related to Mr. Depp, if you see the difference between October of 2020 and November of 2020, what do you see there?
I also see a large jump from October to November of 2020.
Okay. And if we look at the last hashtag in blue that says Johnny Depp is a wife beater, what does that show what did your analysis find in terms of tweets without those hashtags?
It looks to me that also, I mean, there are none prior to, well, little here and there. There are single-digit ones, but prior to November of 2020, there are basically none, and then it jumps up to over 2,000.
And do you know what happened in November of 2020?
My understanding is that's when the UK trial ended.
Okay. We can take this down. And can you put up demonstrative 2, which will make 1901, which will identify as 1901?
That's fine, 1901. Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 1901 can be published.
And Mr. Banya, what data is this chart based on? Oh, I did the same thing. Mr. Schnell, what data is this chart based on?
This chart is actually based on the data we just looked at, but out until January of 2022. And it's just another way of displaying the numbers in graphical form so that we can see peaks and valleys.
And what are the dotted lines?
So if you look at the top, you can see that the dashed lines are the negative hashtags towards Ms. Heard, and the solid ones are the negative hashtags towards Mr. Depp.
And what is being shown here? In your analysis, what is shown with the tweets related to Ms. Heard?
Well, you can see that there's a huge spike in February of 2020, which I believe Mr. Waldman just testified that that's when he leaked an audio tape of some kind. There's also a notable, remarkable spike in July of 2020, in November of 2020, and then in March of 2021.
And the spike in February 2020, that came before the alleged defamatory statements, correct?
Which one?
The spike in February 2020.
That is correct.
And even though that spike came in before the alleged defamatory statements, even taking account for that spike, what time period has more negative tweets about Ms. Heard, before or after April 2020?
Right. So even taking into account this really large spike in February of 2020, and you look at from the beginning of 2018 until the beginning of 2022, there are a majority of the negative tweets are between April of 2020 through the beginning of 2022.
And do you recall at your deposition being asked that a spike in negative hashtags occurring before April 8th, right before April 8th, 2020?
Objection, hearsay.
I would ask about his attorney.
Overruled. Go ahead.
I remember questions regarding particular dates, yes.
And what's your understanding as to why there was more negative tweets in April 6th and April 7th than April 8th, 2020?
Objection, no foundation.
Was there more negative tweets in April 6th, on April 6th and April 7th than in April 8th, 2020 as it relates to Ms. Heard?
Right. If you look at the day-by-day counts, which I supplied to Mr. Depp, and you can see that there's a spike that begins on April 6th and goes for a few days. So April 6th is, to my understanding, before what people are calling the alleged defamatory statement.
And did you look at the tweets for April 6th and April 7th?
I did.
And what did you find?
I found that there are Waldman statements that are the same as on the 8th, on the 6th, and the 7th. The Daily Mail on the 6th, and Vanity Fair on the 7th.
And what terms were being used?
Well, hoax is certainly used in each of them. I think abuse hoax is used in one of them. I don't have it in front of me, but generally speaking, in the 7th, I think it's the same exact terms that are used in the one on the 8th, but the 6th may be slightly different, but it has the word hoax.
Okay. If we can go to the second page of this demonstrative. What's being shown in the second page of this demonstrative?
So this is it's the same data as the first one, but I've removed one hashtag, the Justice for Johnny Depp hashtag, because it kind of overwhelms all the others because there are so many of them. And by removing it, it sort of rescales the graph, and you can see the others much better. And even though they look really tiny in the previous page, you can see that they're big numbers, over 100,000 and stuff. So this shows, and if you look between the two, you can see that the curves are the same. So it shows like a mathematical correlation between all the hashtags.
So what do you mean by mathematical correlation?
Well, they're correlated. You can see the numbers go up and down at the same place.
So I'm understanding the hashtags are essentially all going up and down at the same times?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. And can we put up demonstrative exhibit 3?
Which one, maybe? 1902?
1902.
That's
Yes,
fine.
thank you.
All right, any objection to 1902?
None as a demonstrative.
Yes. Okay. You can publish that.
Mr. Schnell, did you create this chart?
I did.
And what does this chart show?
So what I did was I took the data that I supplied to Mr. Depp, which was the original data from April of 2020 through January of 2021, and I searched it for certain key terms, specifically hoax, fake, and fraud. That's what it's representing. The top part, anyway.
And the top part, if you look at for hoax, fake, and fraud and this is within the negative hashtags or misheard?
Right. This is only searching through the ones that have one of these 4 hashtags in them.
Okay. And if you look at the total, oops, I'm putting that in black. Let's clear that. Oh, you saw the line there. What's the total number of times it was used in the negative tweets, either hoax, fake, or fraud?
81,121.
And did you perform any other searches on the data?
Yes.
And what searches did you perform?
So I also looked in that same data for references to Waldman by itself, or Wald, and then followed by anything followed by Mignon or Minion, depending how you want to pronounce it, sort of a portmanteau of Waldman and filet mignon, I guess, or minions, and looked for those in the same data.
And in terms of the percentage of the amount of times Waldman or Waldmignon was used in the negative hashtags from April 2020 through, is it January 2021?
The percent?
Yeah, what's the percentage?
Yeah, so I found over 25% of the negative hashtag tweets, or 1 out of every 4 on average, had either Waldman or Waldmignon.
And I see you ran searches for hoax, fake, fraud, rather than abuse hoax in quotes or sexual violence hoax in quotes. Why didn't you run those searches?
Objection compound.
Overruled.
So so if I put them in quotes like that, say abuse hoax in quotes, that would require that it show up in exactly that way, with the same spacing and the same order. So if it said something like there was abuse and there was a hoax, it wouldn't get caught. So if I take the quotes out and search for them separately, search for things separately, that'll cover it and make sure that I catch everything.
And based on your analysis of these searches within the negative hashtags, what do the results of these searches mean?
Well, obviously I can't read what's in people's minds, but when I read the disclosure of Mr. Depp's expert, Mr. Banya, he stated that if these terms, particularly the Waldman term,
Objection hearsay.
He's an expert.
Overruled.
if these terms had shown up a lot of times in the negative hashtag tweets, then that could show that they were, paraphrasing the impetus of why people tweeted these. So I sort of adopted Mr. Banya's opinion on that and found this large number. So I agree with Mr. Depp's expert that this could show a substantial correlation.
And to what level of confidence do you hold the opinions you just provided to the jury?
To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
Thank you, Mr. Schnell. I have no further
All
questions.
right, cross-examination.
Sir, this is the first time that you've testified as an expert as in the field of statistical and forensic analysis of social media, isn't it?
I've consulted on litigation for it, but it never got to testimony. That's correct.
This is your first testimony.
Testimony, yes.
Right. And you've never been involved in a defamation case before.
That's correct.
And you're being compensated for your time here today and the work you did, correct?
Berkely Research Group is being compensated, yes.
At $600 an hour.
That's what they're getting paid.
Right. And you're aware that Mr. Depp is being sued based on allegedly defamatory statements. What are the dates of those statements?
My understanding is there was something around April 8th, I believe April 27th and June 24th, somewhere in the end of June.
Okay. And where do you understand those statements to have resided?
In the public media.
All right. in any particular article or?
I didn't consider that.
All right. So you're not offering an opinion on how widely the articles that contain those statements were read?
That's correct.
And you're not offering an opinion as to how many people actually saw the language that's been attributed to Mr. Walt?
Only a minimum number of people who could have seen it based on the tweets that referenced him.
Okay. And you don't know even where those references appear in the articles?
I'm not sure what you mean.
There are statements by Mr. Waldman that appear in articles. Do you understand that?
I do.
Do you know in what portion of the articles the statements appear?
I've looked at the articles, and from that, I've seen where they appear.
And where, in general, do they appear? In the middle, the end? What's your sense?
That I'm not sure of. I mean, the ones I looked at on the 6th and 7th, I think they were towards the top.
All right. So you testified that you reviewed a number of hashtags that you deemed were negative towards Ms. Heard. That's right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the four you picked, at least the negative ones, Justice for Johnny Depp, that's one of them, right?
That's right.
Amber Heard is an abuser. That's one of them.
That is one of them.
We just don't like you, Amber. That's one of them.
That is one of them.
And the last one was Amber Turd, right?
That is another one.
Okay. And these four hashtags you identified and searched for, you don't believe they have any connection, or you testified that you have no connection to these three Waldman statements. The hashtags aren't connected to Waldman, right?
Well, I did an additional analysis that did show how many of those had Waldman connected to them, and I found that 1 out of 4 of them did.
Right. But when you were deposed, you were asked whether these were related, these particular hashtags were related to any of the Waldman statements, and you said no at that time.
I said more than that. I said I didn't know, and then I said I'm basing I'm looking at Mr. Banya's opinion where he says they would be if they were in large number, and I'm adopting his opinion and agreeing with him that they must be connected.
So you're adopting an opinion that hasn't been rendered in this case yet by anybody but you.
Well, I know that Mr. Banya
has testified.
Okay, what I'm saying is I know that Mr. Banya's disclosure says that he is expected to come to that opinion.
All right. But the only person who's ever expressed this opinion today in this courtroom is you, correct?
I would know. I haven't watched everything. I've watched a bit.
So
but
you're adopting your own opinion.
No, I'm adopting the opinion that I read in Mr. Banya's disclosure.
And that's not the opinion you had during your deposition.
I think I did make reference in my deposition to what Mr. Banya said, and that I agreed with it.
All right. And you indicated in deposition you didn't take into account statements made in the media, correct?
Made in what? I couldn't.
You said you did not take into account in your analysis statements made in the media. Yes, in the analysis where I gathered data and decided which data to gather, I did not take into account statements in the media. All right. So you looked at the data, you produced charts, you did analysis relating to the data, but you had no reason at the time you did this to consider any particular statements. Isn't that true?
That's true. I think that's an appropriate scientific methodology to first gather as much data as possible and then drill down on the data.
All right. And the Twitter data you collected shows that the 4 hashtags you identified were in existence before Mr. Waldman made the first statement in April 2020, right?
That's correct.
Right.
In very small number.
But Justice for Johnny Depp has been around since 2013, correct?
That sounds correct.
Yeah. Amber Heard is an abuser, and Amber Turd first appeared in 2016, correct?
I don't recall, actually.
Right. Do you recall if there was any portion of Mr. Waldman's statement that made any reference to Amber Turd?
Not that I've seen.
Right. People can form a negative view of Ms. Heard without reading Mr. Waldman's statements, correct?
People can form a negative opinion of anyone without reading anything. That's correct.
And you didn't consider whether there was negative publicity around Ms. Heard other than the Waldman statements?
Well, what I did was to report on correlation with these hashtags and certain search terms in particular. I wasn't trying to read anyone's mind as to why they used them.
You didn't form any opinion that of the million plus tweets that you looked at, were connected in some way to Mr. Waldman's statements.
I did eventually, yes.
You did eventually after you read somebody else's report relative to testimony that hasn't been given here.
Well, I did it before my deposition.
All right. You have a demonstrative that counsel played for you. Can we put up plaintiff's 1901 again? This is yours, right?
Correct.
Yeah. The biggest spikes, by far the biggest spikes here, are attributable to what hashtag?
Justice for Johnny Depp hashtag.
Yeah. And there are spikes that existed considerably before Mr. Waldman's statement. You were asked about that by counsel?
One of them did. That was the date that Mr. Waldman leaked the audio tape.
The biggest spike was before the statements.
Right, the date he leaked the audio.
And then there were many statements that, or there are many hashtags, or uses of the hashtag, that follow the statements.
You'll have to be more specific.
Well, so you looked at 1.2 million of these hashtags, right?
Right.
In your chart, didn't 980,000 of these plus belong to Justice for Johnny Depp?
That sounds about right. You'd have to show me, but I'll take your word for it.
All right. But the vast majority of them were Justice for Johnny Depp.
A majority of them were.
Well, it wasn't the majority so large that you had to draw another chart?
The reason for drawing another chart is because the numbers were high at particular points, so you wouldn't be able to see the other hashtags.
Right. Literally, this is your chart, and all of the other activity at the bottom you can barely see in comparison to the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp.
Right. As I testified, you can barely see them because of the spikes in the Justice for Johnny Depp hashtag, but when you look at the other chart, you can see that those others are still very large numbers.
So you're not offering any opinion as to what caused these spikes?
That's correct.
Right. So you're not opining as to why these spikes are there?
I'm only talking about correlation.
Right. You're talking about a mathematical connection.
That's right.
Right. And you don't purport to be in anybody's head such that you know why they did a particular post with a particular hashtag.
That's correct.
All right. There's a second spike that appears to be in July of 2020.
Yes, the pointer was pointing to a different one, but yes.
Yeah. Were you aware there was a trial in the UK in 2020?
I'm aware.
And in July?
You're saying it was in July?
No, but as of the time of that spike, there was publicity around a trial, correct?
I don't know how much publicity there was. I know the trial was going on then.
All right. There are a number of things called out in your chart relative to particular dates, December 17th, February 11th, February 14th. You see all those?
I do.
And your chart makes absolutely no reference to and does not identify the dates of any of the Waldman statements, does it, sir?
No, it doesn't call those out, if that's what you're asking.
It calls out a whole bunch of other dates, but nothing relative to the Waldman statements.
Correct.
All right. All right. At some point, you ran searches for additional search terms: hoax, fraud. I think you said fake. And then you don't know why those terms appeared, do you?
I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Are you asking me?
You could not perform a scientific analysis of the reason why those terms appeared in the tweets you were looking at.
Right. I could only show mathematical correlation.
Right. You could show a correlation, but you don't have any idea why they're there.
I can't get into people's heads.
Right. And just because the tweet contains one of the terms does not mean the tweet was in some way prompted by Mr. Walt, right?
Well, there are a few things I searched for. The ones you just mentioned, and then the Waldman and Waldman-Young terms. So, it's not that big a stretch to say that it's related to Mr. Waldman if it's his name and Waldman-Young or Minion.
Wait a minute, is the new standard it's not that big a stretch?
No.
All right,
I'm trying to speak. I'm trying to
certainty, right?
Yes.
All right. So you're not suggesting that you know why Mr. Waldman's name appeared in any of these tweets?
Well, if you look at the tweets that have Waldman-Young, and I looked at a large sample of them.
Just a large sample was 2,000 out of 1,000,002.
No, I looked at more than that of these. But that's another thing that I wouldn't expect to be in controversy. When people are saying that they're part of the Wald minions or things like that, I would expect everybody to agree without arguing that it has to do with Mr. Waldman.
And nobody asked whether it had to do with Mr. Waldman. I'm wondering, how do you know that it had anything to do with Mr. Waldman's statements?
But I was under the impression, I was informed that nobody really knew who Mr. Waldman was before all of this. So I wouldn't expect it to be anything else. I didn't think it was in controversy.
It wasn't in controversy whether everyone knew who Mr. Waldman was? Is that your testimony?
No, I'm saying it wasn't in controversy that if somebody was suddenly talking about him, that it had to do with this case.
But again, it's not, did it have to do with this case? It's, did it have to do with the allegedly defamatory statements? You have no idea, do you, sir?
I can't get into anyone's mind. I can only talk about the science of it.
Right. And so you identified all of these hashtags as negative towards Miss Heard, right?
Right.
Justice for Johnny Depp is not negative towards Miss Heard, is it?
No, but the tweets that use that hashtag are.
No, but the hashtag itself, the hashtag that predominates through your analysis is not, in fact, negative towards Miss Heard.
I'm not opining on the hashtag itself. I'm talking about the tweets that contain that hashtag.
But the hashtag itself is not negative.
That's not part of my opinion, one way or the other.
Do you have an opinion as to whether justice for Johnny Depp is a good thing?
It's not part of my assignment.
Okay. But you'll agree with me, justice in general is a good thing?
Big fan of justice.
All right, me too. No further questions.
All right, redirect. Okay, yes, sir.
Mr. Schnell, you reviewed a large sampling of tweets of justice for Johnny Depp, correct?
I did.
And the tweets that had the hashtag justice for Johnny Depp, how many of them were negative toward Miss Heard?
All of them.
Okay. And what percentage of the tweets with negative hashtags between April 2020 and January 31st, 2021 contain the terms Waldman or Waldman-Young?
Overruled, Allah.
Over 25%. 1 out of 4.
And in your analysis, how far in time did the tweets containing the terms Waldman or Waldmignon go? Like how far to now?
Well,
Beyond the scope of cross?
He was asking about.
Overruled.
So I think I disclosed at my deposition that I looked further into 2022 and found that it continued to go on. I didn't see any end to it at all.
And based on your analysis, again, what period of time had more negative tweets against Ms. Heard, before or after April 2020?
It was clearly double as many from April to 2021.
And that's even including the February 2020 spike, correct?
That's right. So and that happened before April, obviously. So even if you put that in there, it's still a lot more after April of 2020. And there are fewer months in that time period. I think there are 15 months in that time period and 27 months in the first part.
And based on your analysis, what, if any, end do you see to the negative tweets toward Ms. Heard?
Objection, no foundation.
Based on his analysis up until the time?
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. Did you see any, based on your analysis, at the end of the time of your analysis, what was happening with the negative tweets toward Ms. Heard?
To continue to go on.
Okay. Mr. Schnell, after your cross-examination, have any of your opinions in this matter changed?
No, they've not.
Thank you. No.
All right, so you can have a seat in the courtroom or you're free to go. Okay, sir? Thank you. All right, your next witness? Okay, sure.
Thank you, Your Honor. We will be calling Michelle Mulroney by deposition designation and restart.
Okay.
Will you?
All right, you just want to spell the last name for me?
It's Mulrooney.
All right. Okay.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Michelle Mulroney, Los Angeles, California, 90067.
Ms. Mulroney, what is your occupation?
I'm a partner at Venable LLP, an attorney practice.
Could you just please describe give me a brief description of your educational background and work history?
Okay, I attended USC and received my undergraduate degree in 1982. And then I again attended USC and received my law degree in 1985. I then worked for Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher until 1991. And then I worked for an entertainment law firm that was originally called Armstrong Hirsch. When I joined it, then later morphed into several names. And then in 2011, I joined Venable LLP as a partner.
Thank you. What are your areas of practice and expertise?
I'm head of the estate planning, the West Coast estate planning group for Venable.
And does that estate planning involve any aspect of marital estate planning, such as things like prenups and postnups, prenuptials, postnuptials?
Yes, we frequently do prenups, cohabitation, and postnup agreements for.
Would you please briefly describe what a prenuptial and a postnuptial is?
A prenuptial agreement is where spouses contract on the economics of their marriage before they are married, and they discuss things as the nature, and they contract the things as the nature of the property, community separate, etc., and also things like spousal support. And in a postnup, the clients do that after they're married. They contract on the same issues.
Do you regularly represent actors?
Yes.
I'm asking very narrowly, did there come a time when Amber Heard contacted you for representation respecting a prenup or a postnup agreement?
At some point, I was contacted about an Amber Heard prenup.
Ms. Mulroney, I'm going to show you what has been marked as exhibit number 3, and it's an email from you to a Dana Lowry. Do you know who Dana Lowry is?
Yes.
And could you please tell us who Dana Lowry is?
She's a family law attorney practicing in Los Angeles.
And this is dated Monday, February 2, 2015, and says, I look forward to working with you. Please send me, this is from you, please send me the bullet points for the economics of the deal. When you are back in the office tomorrow, I will have Amber's business manager get her financial information to me ASAP. I also like to exchange 2 years of tax returns, but not attach them. Is this your general practice? Let me know. Thanks. Who did Dana Lowry represent?
Johnny Depp.
I take it Amber in the actual document is Amber Heard, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if I just direct your attention to the top of the email where it says February 2, 2015, what, if anything, does this do to refresh your recollection on when approximately you were contacted about representing Amber Heard in connection with the prenup?
It makes the approximate date more clear to me.
Okay. And based on this, when approximately were you contacted to represent Amber Heard in connection with the prenup or postnup?
The early part of February, the late part of January, or the early part of February 2015.
Ms. Mulroney, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 4. And it is an email from you to Dana Lowry, which is Mr. Depp's counsel, correct?
During this time period, correct.
And it's dated Tuesday, February 3. And I'm going to scroll down first so we get the earliest part of it. And the first part of it is an email from Dana Lowry to you, dated February 3rd at 10:13, and says J/A deal points. Do you know what J/A means? I'm going to take you, first of all, to the bottom part, which is the J/deal points. Do you have an understanding of what J/A means?
I believe it means Johnny/Amber deal points.
Absent a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement, is California what we call a common law property state?
No,
What is it?
it's a community property state.
Okay, and what does that mean?
Generally means that all earnings after the date of marriage are owned 50. Each party has an undivided 50% interest in those earnings. Yes.
What was your understanding of the purpose of the confidentiality agreement?
It's very standard when you're doing a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement, when either party is disclosing their assets, that they ask for a confidentiality agreement.
You respond on February 17, Dana, I have forwarded to Amber. She is filming a movie, but hope to connect with her by the end of the week. I will keep trying to move forward. I'm asking you what you meant by I will keep trying to move forward.
I assume I meant that we're trying to get a postnuptial agreement signed between the parties, and that's what I was hired for.
To show you what has been marked as exhibit number 7. And I'm going to start again with going down to show you where the stream is here. And it says, I'll read, on February 17, that's the same email we've seen a couple times now, where she's attaching the confidentiality agreement, telling that she'll have a draft post-nap agreement, but she's getting the signed confidentiality agreement first. And then I'm going to direct your attention to the very top part, and that is Wednesday, February 18. And it's from you to Dana Lowry, and it says, Amber is sending the signed confidentiality agreement to me. I assume I will receive all the underlying financials and a list of anticipated future revenue streams and documentation pertaining thereto. Now, what did you mean by underlying financials and a list of anticipated future revenue streams and documentation pertaining thereto?
I mean, this is typical for an actor. They have profit participations, back ends. I wanted to have a list of what his future revenue would be. He might have had movies booked that he would render services after marriage. I just wanted to see the pro bono.
What did you mean by back ends?
Back end is either profit participation or royalties. Sometimes it's box office bonuses. You just have to look at the underlying agreement on each movie, TV show, etc., to track what the revenue will be from each project.
And why is that relevant?
I want to know what they're going to make during the marriage. I want to know the income during the marriage.
And those are all components of what they make during the marriage?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then you said, I can't really comment on the document until I get this information. What document were you referring to there?
The post-nup agreement that I anticipated she would send.
How much time expired between when you were sent the confidentiality agreement for Amber Heard to sign and when you indicated back to counsel for Mr. Depp that Amber is sending the signed confidentiality agreement to you?
The next day.
What, if any, communication did you receive from Mr. Depp in connection with the post-nup agreement?
I received one telephone call.
And whom did you receive that telephone call from?
Mr. Depp.
Please describe the telephone call from Mr. Depp.
My recollection is that he was very mean, that he called me names, and that he fired me on behalf of them.
When you say that he was very mean, what did you mean?
Well, my only exact recollection is he called me a bitch.
Mr. Depp called you a bitch on that telephone call?
Hearsay, leaving.
What, if any, observations did you make during the telephone call from Mr. Depp, during which time he called you a bitch?
I thought he was under the influence.
Why did you think that?
He was slurring his words, and his speech pattern was similar to my children's speech pattern when they were under the influence. I was just extremely rattled by the call. I mean, I was on the phone for a very short time with him because he was represented by counsel, and I didn't want to be rude and hang up, but I told him I had to hang up. Like after 2 or 3 minutes after I realized what was happening, it took me very off guard, and that's all I remember is that it really shook me up.
After that phone call, did you perform any further services for Ms. Heard in connection with the postnuptial agreement?
No.
Do you recall ever seeing a postnuptial draft agreement?
No.
Has either Ms. Heard or Mr. Depp contacted you at any time after the call with Mr. Depp respecting pursuing a postnuptial agreement?
No.
Who, if anyone, was paying your legal services?
I don't recall.
Was it your understanding that Mr. Depp had the authority to fire you?
No.
Did you tell him that?
I don't recall.
And isn't it true that he wouldn't have had the authority to fire you even if he weren't paying for your legal services? True?
True.
What, if any, communications did you have with Dana Lully about your conversation with Mr. Depp after the conversation with Mr. Depp?
I don't recall specifically.
What do you recall generally, if anything?
I do recall that I told her that I was no longer representing her. But I don't know if I did that in writing. Somehow she knew.
But and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you testified that Mr. Depp did not have the authority to fire you, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Mulroney, when did your attorney-client relationship with Ms. Heard relating to a potential postnuptial agreement terminate?
Shortly after that phone call.
When you say shortly after that phone call, can you give us a time frame of how long it was after the phone call?
Within a few days, could be one.
He didn't have the power to fire you, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any recollection of ever receiving any more communications from Dana Lowry furthering the postnuptial agreement after Johnny Depp called you and told you he was firing you on behalf of Amber and called you names?
No substantive, I recall that there was no more substantive conversations.
Is there any question in your mind that it was Mr. Depp who called you?
No.
All right. Yes, ma'am, your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, we'd like to call the Disney corporate representative.
All right.
Would you please state your name and your business address for the record?
Tina Newman, Walt Disney Studios Motion Picture Production, Live Action, 500 South Buena Vista Street, Burbank, California, 91521.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm a production executive.
And what is your job title?
That is my title, production executive. I work in the live action feature division for Disney.
Is it your understanding you're testifying on behalf of Walt Disney Motion Pictures Group?
Yes.
Were you involved in the gathering of the documents responsive to the document subpoena to Disney?
Yes, I did provide some documentation to Alec and his group from our production group.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at what I've just highlighted under topic number, it's subpoena ducis tecum, paragraph number 2. And it asks for documents relating to this case, in fact, and then it also says specifically, this specifically includes the op-ed by Ms. Heard and any impact it may have had on the above. And that includes, as it's defined above, including the business relationship with Mr. Depp, including considering Mr. Depp for any work with Disney or future Pirates of the Caribbean role, a lesser or greater role, a different role, or a different production. Do you recall seeing in any of the documents you reviewed, either being involved as the corporate designee or in preparing as the corporate designee, do you recall seeing an op-ed written by Ms. Heard?
No.
Do you recall in your preparation as the corporate designee of Disney and your review of the documents that were produced by Disney, any document that referred in any manner to the op-ed written by Ms. Heard?
I would say no.
Do you remember seeing in any of the documents you reviewed that were produced by Disney in response to the subpoena ducis tecum, the word op-ed in any of those documents?
I don't recall that, no.
Did you have any discussions with anyone at Disney about any future Pirates of the Caribbean role, a lesser or greater role, a different role, or a different production?
No.
Did you have any discussions with anyone at Disney about the impact of the op-ed by Ms. Heard on the relationship between Disney and Mr. Depp, including considering Mr. Depp for any work with Disney and future Pirates of the Caribbean role, a lesser or greater role, a different role, or a different production?
No.
Do you know whether Mr. Depp is being considered for a role in Pirates 6?
No.
And when you say no, I think I have to probably ask clarification. Does that mean you don't know one way or the other, or he is not being considered?
I don't know one way or the other. It doesn't fall.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that decision doesn't fall within my job responsibility. It's above my head. It's the best way to say it.
So what is the knowledge you have about Pirates 6?
Like I said, I just know that it's a project that's possibly in development at the studio. That's it.
Do you know whether anyone at Disney has ever even read the op-ed written by Ms. Heard?
No.
Are you aware of anyone else at Disney who has knowledge of the topic areas in the deposition notice, that's deposition exhibit number 2, that beyond what you know?
I can't honestly say. I can't speak for someone else. Like I explained earlier, my knowledge and what my job functionality is at the studio plateaus, and there are people that I work under, and those particular persons may or may not have more knowledge, but I can't speak on behalf of them.
Is Disney aware that Mr. Depp has testified under oath that he would not take another Pirates of the Caribbean franchise role for $300 million and 1 million alpacas?
No.
Would Disney entertain paying Mr. Depp more than $300 million and provide him with more than 1 million alpacas to be able to obtain his services for any future Pirates of the Caribbean role?
No.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 52 to Alan Horn. Who's that?
He was our co-chairman.
Of Disney?
Yes.
And Alan Bergman, who's he?
Same. He's the other co-chairman of Disney, or was at the time.
And then Sean Bailey, you indicated, was the president?
It's our president of production, correct.
Okay, and then Ricky Strauss, who's he?
I believe at the time he was the head of our marketing group.
And Paul Rader?
Paul Rader is the head of communications.
All right, and this is from Angela Shaw, and it's dated 5/10/2017. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it says, subject HR, Johnny Depp, a star in crisis, and the insane story of his missing millions. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any understanding as to why Angela Shaw was sending this communication to this group, the 2 co-chairmen, the president, vice president of production, head of communications on this particular day?
I don't know what the intent of the email is, but obviously we have a relationship as a company with Johnny, so I assume that's why she may be bringing it to their attention.
All right, and just to take that a little bit further, given that Disney has a relationship with Johnny Depp, if there is publicity relating to Johnny Depp, whether it be positive or negative, that would be relevant to Disney, would it not?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say how it's relevant to Disney, but given that Angela is part of communications, it's her job to, keep the studio abreast, I guess, of anything concerning the company. So that's about as far as I can read into it.
Okay. And so that's your interpretation of why Angela Shaw sent this to that group of people, was to keep them apprised of this particular article on Johnny Depp. Would you agree?
Yeah, that would be my assumption.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been labeled as exhibit number 53, and it is Disney 114 through 137. And I'm going to ask you if you recognize this document.
Well, it looks like an internal email. It may have been part of the disclosure documents.
This one's from Alan Horn, and I think we've identified Alan Horn before. Well, actually, it starts with, let's start down here. On June 21st, 2018, all right? And then it has a reply from Sean Bailey, sad. Do you see that?
Yes.
What was Mr. Bailey's position with Disney on June 21st, 2018?
I believe he was the president then.
Okay.
He may have been the EVP. I don't know.
Okay. And then we have an email at the top. It's to Sean Bailey, CC Janelle Tipton. And then it has some copies to some other people. It's from Alan Horn. I believe we said he was one of the co-directors. Is that correct?
Co-chairman.
Co-chairman. Okay. And Alan Bergman.
The other co-chairman.
Okay. And do you have any recollection of ever reading the Rolling Stones article about Johnny Depp back in this time frame?
I honestly don't remember if I ever read this document. I may have.
Do you have any understanding of why this would be sent from Alan Horn to these other individuals on the top?
Again, same as before, just because of the fact that we have a relationship with Johnny. So they may have determined it was important to bring it to their attention.
All right, Ms. Newman, I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 54. And do you recognize this document?
Yes, it looks like a email.
Please describe it for me.
It's an email, well, it started from Scott to myself. Scott Sellers is in Post Finance. And then I replied to Scott. So it looks like an email exchange between the two of us.
All right. And you said Scott Sellers is in Post Finance?
Correct.
What is that?
He handles all finances once film goes into post-production on any given picture. Also reporting for the studio, internal reporting, finances.
All right. And this is July 14, 2018 that he's sending this to you, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall reading the story that was in the Rolling Stone, The Trouble with Johnny Depp?
I mean, to be honest, I don't really remember much about the story, but obviously I must have looked at it and commented.
Right, and in fact, you commented depressing. Do you see
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay. And just to go back to refreshing your recollection on the template, do you see that it has importance and received on this when you sent it back?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Newman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 56. And it is a document also produced by Disney, and there's the date stamps, Disney 167 through 177. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at the top there. This is to Alan Bergman from, and it has THR's Today and Entertainment. Do you understand what that is?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to turn down to 169. It says, Johnny Depp's legal team prepares for court hearing about Amber Heard abuse claims. The actor's camp is previewing the evidence that it will present in an upcoming court hearing in the UK this fall, tied to a defamation lawsuit against the Sun for an article that labeled the actor a, quote, wife beater, unquote. Katie Kaleni reports. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you have a recollection of learning about this and reading about the UK case in this time frame? We're talking October 2018.
I may have seen a headline come across my desk in the same manner as Alan received it, but that's probably as far as it went.
Ms. Newman, I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition number 60. And it's dated November 5, 2020. And it says Disney reportedly scraps plans for Depp's POTC 6. I'm assuming that's Pirates of the Caribbean 6 return. You see that? Question was, did you see it?
Yes, I see it.
As you sit here today, are you aware of any document in Disney's emails or in their IT system or anywhere that contains Amber Heard's op-ed from December of 2018?
I mean, no, not that I'm aware.
Okay. Are you aware of any decision maker within Disney who has ever said they are not casting Johnny Depp in Pirates 6 or any other role because of Amber Heard's op-ed?
No.
Are you aware of any decision maker outside of Disney? And by this, I'm including producers, directors, people of that ilk, who have ever said they were not considering Mr. Depp for Pirates 6 or any other movie because of Amber Heard's op-ed from December 2018?
No.
All right. Do we? How much time is it?
We have an 11-minute one.
Okay, that's fine. What's your next witness?
Ellen Barkin,
All right.
B-A-R-K-I-N.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Barkin.
Good morning.
I think the first thing that would be very short but very simple and clean for the record is if you could just describe kind of your career background. I know it's very lengthy, but just give a kind of brief summary of kind of when you started working and what you've done during your career.
I started acting professionally about 26 or 7. And I did theater, television, movies, lots of them. That's what I did for 40 years.
In the course of your career acting in theater, television, movies, etc., did you come to meet a person by the name of Johnny Depp?
Yes.
Can you specify in time, Ms. Barkin, when you met him?
I would say 1990.
And upon or after meeting him, did there come a time when you became friends?
Yes.
And can you describe how that happened?
We just developed a friendship over time that lasted, I guess, if we met in the 90s, maybe 10 years, a little less.
And fair to say that Mr. Depp at the time was also an actor, a professional actor?
Yes.
Did you act in any film, stage, or TV productions with Mr. Depp?
Yes, I was in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
How often would you see Mr. Depp?
When I lived in New York, usually whenever I go to LA, if I were in LA, I'd see him once a week, maybe more. I mean, the friendship went up and down, living on different coasts.
And did there come a time when your friendship with Mr. Depp became more than that, became romantic in nature?
Yes.
And at what point in time did your relationship with Mr. Depp take a romantic turn?
After I had moved to Hollywood, And he, switched the buttons.
Recall what year you moved to Hollywood?
Yes, 1994.
When you say switch the buttons, can you tell me what you meant by that?
The friendship went from a purely platonic friendship to a romantic one.
At that point in 1994, when the relationship turned romantic, to your knowledge,
change that to sexual.
To sexual.
Thank you.
For how long did your relationship with Mr. Depp remain sexual?
Several months. Anywhere between 3 and 5, 6.
And during that period, how often would you see Mr. Depp? That period when it was sexual?
I'd say I'd see him 3 or 4 times a week.
And again, I'm not looking to pry into private details, but can you tell me like where you would see him? Just give me some sense of that.
Yeah, he would come to my house, or I would go to his house.
And both houses in LA?
Yes, about 10-minute drive apart from each other.
And at either when you were at his house, where you didn't stay the night, or where you were at his house when you did stay the night, were there other people in the house who saw you there? Who would those people be?
He had an assistant. His sister. That's all I can remember now.
Do you recall the name of the assistant?
I don't know his name. He was referred to as Pig.
He was referred to by whom as Pig?
Johnny Depp.
At any point that you were either initially friends and then sexual with Mr. Depp, did you become aware that he drank to excess?
I was always aware.
Okay, and can you explain how you were aware of that?
He was drunk all the time, a lot of the time.
And that would apply both to when you were initially friends and then later when it became sexual?
Yeah.
And what was he drunk? What was your understanding? What had he drunk to become drunk?
He was a red wine drinker.
Okay. In addition to alcohol, were you aware at that time that Mr. Depp was taking any prescription medication?
No.
Okay. Same question, Mr. Barkin, for illegal substances.
Yes.
Same question. And what illegal substances?
Hallucinogenics, cocaine, marijuana.
Hallucinogenics. Can you say specifically what those were?
I don't really know. He called me and told me he was tripping.
With respect to any of that, hallucinogenics, cocaine, or marijuana, did he do any of that in your presence?
Yes.
More than once?
All the time.
When you say all the time, how many times, again, in the period that you were both first friends and sexual, then sexual with Mr. Depp, do you think you saw him?
I couldn't even tell you. I mean, I just know he was always drinking or smoking a joint.
But would it be fair to say more than at least dozens of times?
Yeah. Over the full course, oh yeah.
Now, did you ever observe, Ms. Barkin, Mr. Depp's behavior change when he drank more or used more drugs?
I did not.
So he was kind of the same all the time, fair to say?
It was not the same. He was high.
Did there come a time, Ms. Barkin, when Mr. Depp acted in a way that was out of control with you?
Yes. Mr. Depp threw a wine bottle across the room, the hotel room on one instance in Las Vegas while we were shooting Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Was something about to happen?
A fight was going on.
Between you and Mr. Depp?
No.
Who was the fight between?
Between Johnny Depp and his friends in the room, the assistant. Honestly, I don't remember.
And the bottle that, do you remember sitting here today, Ms. Barkin, whether the bottle was full of wine or empty?
I don't.
Sitting here today, Ms. Barkin, do you remember whether the bottle hit you?
No, it did not.
Did the bottle hit anyone else?
No, it did not.
Approximately how far away from you was Mr. Depp when he threw the bottle?
Across the room, so maybe by that break in the table or a little further down. It was a toss.
And sitting here today, if the bottle had hit you, would it have injured you? Ms. Barkin, was it your understanding back then that he was throwing the bottle at you?
I don't know why he threw the bottle.
And when he threw it, was it in your direction?
Yes.
Were there other people standing around you?
Yes.
So he threw it in your direction at a group of people?
Yes.
Whose hotel room was it?
His, Johnny Depp's.
Who broke off?
He did.
How did it come about that Mr. Depp broke off your relationship?
I went to go home. There was a big goodbye, crying, a lot of jealous, and don't do this, don't do that. And I never heard from him again after that.
And did Mr. Depp not want you to go back to Los Angeles at the time?
Yes, he didn't want me to go. I was only supposed to be there for 2 days. I stayed for longer.
And you just referenced, you just used the word jealous. How did that come up? What did he say that indicated to you that he was jealous?
He's just a jealous man, controlling. Where are you going? Who are you going with? What did you do last night? I had a scratch on my back once that got him very, very angry because he insisted it came from me having sex with a person who wasn't him.
During the time that you were in a sexual relationship with Mr. Depp, was it common for him to say things to you about being controlling, to use your words, or being jealous of you?
Yeah, very common.
And in these instances, when Mr. Depp became jealous or controlling, did he also become angry?
Yeah, and demanding.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go and take our afternoon recess. Please do not discuss the case and do not do any outside research, okay? We'll see you back in 15 minutes. All right, we'll come back at 3:45. Does that give you time to be ready? Okay, all right, 3:45. seated. Your next witness.
Your Honor, our next witness is Adam Waldman, and I will start the questioning, and then Mr. Rottenborn split that with me, and we'll be questioning next, and then it will be Mr. Depp's counsel.
All right, thank you.
Morning. My name is Elaine Brettahoff, and together with Ben Rottenborn, we represent Amber Laura Hurd. Will you please state your name and address?
Sure, it's Adam Robert Waldman, Washington, D.C.
And what is your current occupation?
Attorney. I'm also involved with a skincare company in a variety of capacities.
How long have you been an attorney?
I think since 1995.
Do you currently represent John C. Depp II, who I will be referring to in this deposition as Mr. Depp or Depp?
I do.
And is this representation an attorney-client representation?
It is.
Does it include any other type of representation of Mr. Depp other than as an attorney-client?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question on the grounds of attorney-client privilege and attorney work product. You can't answer that question without disclosing communications between himself and his client, Mr. Depp. As you're aware, Ms. Brettahoff, the court has ruled that Mr. Depp has not waived attorney-client privilege and will not be waiving attorney-client privilege. So you're aware of that.
So, Mr. Chu, I'm not sure that you heard my question. I was actually asking him if he had any other type of representation relationship with Mr. Depp other than as an attorney-client.
I think he can answer that yes or no, but I would instruct the witness on behalf of Johnny Depp not to disclose any communications you've had with your client.
No.
So just so we're clear, since we had a little bit of record back and forth, the only way in which you represent Mr. Depp is as an attorney-client representation. Is that correct? I'm sorry, Mr. Waldman?
I believe that's true.
Okay. And you are here today providing this deposition under a subpoena and then subsequent notice, correct?
Yes.
And when did you first become Mr. Depp's counsel?
I think that it was around October 2016.
And what is your role in this case as counsel for Mr. Depp?
Objection. I would instruct the witness not to answer that question.
Okay, I'll follow the instruction.
When did you first meet Mr. Depp as opposed to first start representing him?
I first met him in October of 2016.
How is it that you came to meet Mr. Depp?
The general counsel that I referenced a moment ago asked me to go and have a meeting with him, with Mr. Depp, and to talk about a financial problem that he was having.
Did you enter into a written representation agreement with Mr. Depp when you began your representation?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. That calls for attorney-client privilege.
Okay, I follow the instruction.
Have you entered into more than one representation agreement with Mr. Depp during the course of your representation?
Same instruction not to answer. You can't answer that without disclosing attorney-client communications and attorney work product.
Mr. Waldman, when did you consider your attorney-client relationship with Mr. Depp to have begun?
I believe it began the night I met him, actually.
Sometime in October 2016?
Yes, ma'am.
Has the attorney-client relationship between you and Mr. Depp been severed at any point between October 2016 and the present?
Would instruct the witness not to answer that question on the grounds that you can't answer that question without disclosing attorney-client communications.
Okay, I accept the instruction.
As Mr. Depp's attorney, you have provided him with advice. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
And you have charged Mr. Depp for your advice, correct?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. You can't answer that without disclosing attorney-client communications, and the fee arrangement in any event is irrelevant. But I'm instructing him not to answer on the grounds of privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, when you provide legal services in an attorney-client relationship, your understanding of that is that you provide advice and your client in turn compensates you in some manner. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, as a general matter, that's how I understand an attorney-client relationship. Yes.
And has Mr. Depp paid you for advice?
I do instruct the witness not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege. You can't answer that question without disclosing your communications with Mr. Depp.
I accept the instruction.
Well, let's go general again and see if maybe we can work at it from that perspective. So in your relationship with your clients, you provide advice and it's up to the client to determine whether to follow that advice. Would that be fair to say?
As a general matter, I do agree with that statement, yes.
All right. And by the same token, it would be up to the client to determine whether to reject your advice in whole or part, correct?
You're still speaking in general.
Correct.
In general, yes.
Okay. Now, did your relationship with Mr. Depp, and I'm talking about your attorney-client relationship, deviate from those general principles that in some way Mr. Depp is not permitted to follow or reject your advice?
Would instruct the witness not to answer the question based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Now, Mr. Depp has the right to terminate your representation at any time. Is that correct?
But yes, I think it's true.
Okay. I think it would be
would be free to terminate at any time.
My apologies, Mr. Waldman. I didn't realize you were still talking. Did you finish?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Now, has Mr. Depp terminated your representation of him at any time between October 2016 and the present?
That's the same question that I instructed Mr. Waldman not to answer before, just stated in a slightly different way, so I would instruct the witness not to answer that question.
I accept the instruction.
Now, and Mr. Depp, as the client in your relationship, is in the position to make the final decision regardless of your advice. Would you agree?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question. I don't know that I know he can't answer that question without disclosing communications with Mr. Depp. So I instruct the witness not to answer.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, if you were advising a client in an attorney-client relationship and you were in settlement negotiations, would it be you or the client who has the ultimate decision-making ability?
But to speculate about the question, yes, generally the client would be responsible for deciding, the ultimate outcome of a settlement. Yes.
Now, you met Mr. Depp after he and Amber Heard had split up. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you met Mr. Depp after he and Amber Heard had reached a settlement in their divorce. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
So you have no personal knowledge of anything that went on during their marriage. Is that fair to say?
Well, it depends what you mean by personal knowledge. I wasn't there. That's what you mean. Correct.
You never witnessed any interaction between Mr. Depp and Amber Heard prior to October 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you have no personal knowledge of any conduct by either of them against the other prior to October 2016. Is that correct?
Again, if you're asking me, do I have any knowledge of their conduct? I think I have knowledge of their conduct. I think maybe you're asking me, did I witness conduct?
I'm asking personal knowledge, which would mean you would have had to have witnessed it.
If you're asking whether I've witnessed it, the answer is no.
Now, your initial knowledge of the relationship between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard was based on your interviews with Mr. Depp. Would that be fair to say?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because he can't even answer yes or no without disclosing the substance of communications with his client, Mr. Depp.
I accept the instruction.
Once you came into Mr. Depp's life and became his counsel, Mr. Depp filed with your assistance a number of lawsuits. Would you agree?
Yes.
Did Mr. Depp terminate Tracy Jacobs as his agent before or after you became Mr. Depp's counsel?
Mr. Waldman, I would instruct you not to answer that question if doing so would require you to disclose any communications you had with Mr. Depp.
It would.
How long had Tracy Jacobs been Mr. Depp's agent at the time Mr. Depp terminated Tracy Jacobs?
And again, Adam, same instruction to the extent that that answering the question requires you to disclose communications that you had with Mr. Depp. I would instruct you not to answer the question.
It would.
Was it Mr. Depp's decision to terminate Tracy Jacobs?
Again, I would instruct you not to answer that question because that could only have come from Mr. Depp in the communication with you.
I accept the instruction.
After you began representing Mr. Depp filed a lawsuit against Joel Mandel, Mr. Depp's former business manager, correct?
That's correct.
And you represented Mr. Depp in that lawsuit against Joel Mandel and his company, did you not?
I did.
But it was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to file the lawsuit against Mr. Mandel and his company. Would you agree?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because it would require disclosure of communications between Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman as to who was advising who as to filing the case against TMG and the Mandel brothers. So I would instruct you not to answer that.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp have the ultimate decision-making ability with respect to the lawsuit against Mr. Mandel and his company?
And again, I would instruct you not to answer to the extent it requires you to disclose attorney-client communication.
It would.
After you began representing Mr. Depp filed a lawsuit against Jake Bloom, Mr. Depp's former attorney, correct?
That's correct.
And you represented Mr. Depp in that lawsuit against Jake Bloom and his law firm, did you not?
I did.
But it was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to file the lawsuit against Mr. Bloom and his law firm, is that correct?
Again, I would instruct the witness not to answer to the extent it requires him to disclose attorney-client communication.
It would.
And Mr. Depp, though, was the ultimate decision maker in connection with any decisions made in the litigation against Mr. Bloom and his law firm. Would you agree?
Same instruction not to answer. It's basically the same question, gussied up a bit. So same instruction not to answer.
I accept the instruction.
After you began representing Mr. Depp filed a lawsuit against the Sun newspaper and its editor-in-chief, Dan Wooten, correct?
Correct.
For purposes of this deposition, I may refer to the lawsuit against the Sun and its editor, Dan Wooten, as the UK lawsuit or the UK litigation. Will you understand those references to mean this?
I will.
What was your role in the UK litigation?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because it necessarily requires him or would require him to disclose his communications with his client, Johnny Depp.
It would.
You represented Mr. Depp throughout the UK litigation, correct?
Again, I would.
And Mr. Depp alleged in the UK litigation that the Sun and Dan Wooten had committed libel by accusing Mr. Depp of being a, quote, wife beater, end of quote, and committing domestic violence against Amber Heard, correct?
That's true.
It was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to bring the UK lawsuit against the Sun and Dan Wooten, correct?
And again, I would instruct the witness not to answer I would instruct him not to answer because it perforce would require him to disclose attorney-client communications as to the thought process that went into filing that particular lawsuit.
I accept the instruction.
After you began representing Mr. Depp filed suit against Amber Heard, his former wife, correct?
That's correct.
And you represented Mr. Depp in the lawsuit against Amber Heard from March 1, 2019 up until October of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it was Mr. Depp's decision on whether to file the lawsuit against Amber Heard. Is that correct?
Would instruct the witness not to answer that question based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
And Mr. Depp is alleging in this lawsuit that Amber Heard defamed him by suggesting that he had committed domestic abuse against her, correct?
Yes.
As part of your representation of Mr. Depp, you contacted potential witnesses. Is that correct?
Again, I would. That is attorney work product, and that is protected in Virginia. So I would object on that basis, but you can answer that question yes or no.
Yes.
You also spoke with the press on Mr. Depp's behalf, did you not?
And I would instruct the witness not to answer to the extent that it requires disclosure of any communications between yourself and Mr. Depp.
It would.
And therefore?
And therefore I accept the instruction.
How frequently did you communicate with the press on Mr. Depp's behalf?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question because impossible to do so without disclosing attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you communicate with the press?
Same instruction not to answer on the same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
What were you hoping to gain?
Same instruction not to answer the question.
I accept it.
You remain Mr. Depp's primary counsel for all of his affairs. Isn't that correct?
I'm going to instruct the witness not to answer that because I don't think you can answer that without disclosing your communications with Mr. Depp, and we have to be consistent.
That's true, and I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 3. Did there come a time in 2018 that you contacted Rolling Stone about writing an article about Mr. Depp?
And to the extent that you cannot answer it without disclosing communications with Mr. Depp, I would instruct you not to answer.
I think it would implicate discussions with Mr. Depp, so I accept your instruction.
The author of this article, which was published on June 21, 2018, is Stephen Roderick. Were you present when Mr. Roderick interviewed Mr. Depp?
You may answer that question yes or no.
It's not yes or no. I was there for some of it.
Okay. Was the Rolling Stone interview before or after Mr. Depp filed suit against the Sun and Dan Wooten?
I'm not sure.
Do you recall whether the publication of this Rolling Stone article was before or after Mr. Depp filed the lawsuit against the Sun and Dan Wooten?
I don't.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at page 10. And it says on page 10, it was Adam Waldman who first contacted Rolling Stone about writing a story about the injustice being done to Depp's reputation and bottom line. Do you see that? Well, before you go there, Mr. Waldman, I asked you a question. I just read that and said, do you see that? Can you answer that question?
I thought I answered yes, but yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. And is that an accurate statement?
No.
What is inaccurate about it?
It says it was Adam Waldman who first contacted Rolling Stone. That's incorrect.
What is correct?
What is correct is that I was not the first to contact Rolling Stone.
Who first contacted Rolling Stone?
Mr. Depp.
I'm going to ask the question, notwithstanding, why did Mr. Depp contact Rolling Stone?
I would instruct you not to answer that question.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp authorize you to have communications with the Rolling Stone to set up this interview?
Instruct you not to answer that question on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Did you assist Mr. Depp with publicity on Mr. Depp's behalf?
I would instruct you not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client communications.
I accept the instruction.
In your view, does assisting Mr. Depp with publicity constitute legal work?
The witness has already testified he had one engagement for Mr. Depp, and that was a legal engagement. So I'm going to instruct him not to answer any questions about his communications with Mr. Depp.
I accept the instruction.
In participating in the interview with the Rolling Stones, were you speaking on Mr. Depp's behalf?
And I'm going to instruct not to answer because, again, I don't think you can answer that question without disclosing your communications with Mr. Depp about authority. So I'm instructing you not to answer the question.
It was Mr. Depp's choice whether you said anything to the press relating to Mr. Depp. Would you agree?
I instruct the witness not to answer.
I accept
Mr. Waldman, you reached out to a number of other publications to speak on Mr. Depp's behalf. Do you recall?
Again, I would instruct not to answer to the extent it requires you to disclose communications that you had with Mr. Depp.
It would, and I accept the instruction.
How many publications did you communicate with on behalf of Mr. Depp?
Same instruction not to answer based on attorney-client privilege and attorney work product.
I accept the instruction.
How many publications did you reach out to on Mr. Depp's behalf relating to the UK litigation?
Same instruction not to answer on the same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
How many publications did you reach out to on Mr. Depp's behalf relating to this litigation?
Same instruction on the same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
How many publications did you reach out to concerning allegations that Mr. Depp had abused Amber Heard?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, you had a Twitter account, did you not?
I did.
When did you begin that Twitter account?
I'm not sure of the date.
Approximately when?
I'm not even sure of the year.
Was it prior to 2005, 2010, 2015?
Do you want me to speculate?
I want you to give me your best estimate.
Okay. I'm really not sure of the year. I couldn't put a specific date on it.
Do you recall?
If you want to give me ranges, I could try.
Do you recall how many years you had the Twitter account?
Not precisely, no.
Was it more than a year?
I think so.
Was it more than 3 years?
I don't think so.
Now, you had your Twitter account suspended, correct?
Yes, that's true. My Twitter account was suspended.
Do you recall when that was?
Not with specificity, no.
Do you recall why?
Well, I wrote several letters to Twitter to ask why I was suspended for life from their platform. And the response that I received was multiple violations of their policy. So I asked, could they name one example of those multiple violations? And they responded by saying now they were appealing, without my asking them to do so, my suspension. And that's when they sent me another note that I was suspended for life.
So just so the record's clear, so you have been suspended for life by Twitter?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a Twitter account now?
No.
Do you still communicate with the press relating to Mr. Depp?
And I would instruct the witness not to answer the question to the extent that it requires you to disclose communications between you and Johnny.
It would, so I accept the instruction.
Do you still communicate with the press on Mr. Depp's behalf?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Has Mr. Depp ever asked you not to speak to the press?
Same instruction, same grounds. That on its face, it would require Mr. Waldman to disclose his communications with Mr. Depp, which he will not do.
It would, and I accept the instruction.
Would you have followed Mr. Depp's direction if he had asked you not to speak to the press?
I will instruct the witness not to answer because it's an end around the attorney-client privilege. It's clever, but I'm going to instruct the witness not to answer.
I accept the instruction.
Has Mr. Depp ever asked you not to speak to the press about issues involving he and Amber Heard?
We'd instruct the witness not to answer the question on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Would you have followed Mr. Depp's direction if he had asked you not to speak with the press about issues involving he and Amber Heard?
And I will instruct not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Has Mr. Depp ever asked you to correct or retract any statements you made to the press relating to Mr. Depp or Mr. Heard or Amber Heard?
Would instruct the witness not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Would you have followed Mr. Depp's direction if he had asked you to correct or retract any statements you made to the press relating to Mr. Depp or Amber Heard?
Same instruction, same grounds.
And I accept the instruction.
Have you ever asked the press to correct or retract any statements you have made to the press relating to Mr. Depp or Amber Heard?
I want to make sure I understand the instruction. Are you saying you instruct not to answer in the event it implicates privileged conversations with Mr. Depp?
Yeah, I think I'm going to instruct not to answer.
Okay, thank you. I understand. I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as exhibit number 4. I think I'm going to try to blow it up just a touch. It's kind of hard to read. Okay. And it's an article from July 3, 2020. The Mail Online. This is Daily Mail Online. Do you see that?
I do.
No, actually, if I'm just going to go to page 8, I'm going to ask you to take a look at the following. It says, Adam Waldman, Depp's lawyer, said afterwards, quote, Amber Heard and her friends in the media used fake sexual violence allegations as both a sword and a shield, depending on their needs. They have selected some of her sexual violence hoax facts, quote facts, end of quote, as the sword, inflicting them on the public and Mr. Depp. Do you see that?
I do.
Did you make that statement?
I believe I did.
Did you make that statement on behalf of Mr. Depp?
Instruct the witness not to answer that question on attorney-client privilege grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you make the statement?
Same instruction, same rationale. You can't answer the why question without disclosing attorney-client privilege, so I would instruct you not to answer.
Were you representing Mr. Depp at the time you made this statement?
And in any event, I'm going to instruct the witness not to answer that question on attorney-client privilege grounds.
I apologize. I actually didn't hear the question. I can agree with the instruction, but I probably should hear the question.
Fair enough.
Amy, could you read that back, please? Thank you.
One moment.
Were you representing Mr. Depp at the time you made this statement?
I would instruct the witness not to answer on attorney-client privilege grounds.
Thank you. I accept the instruction. Sorry for the repetition.
Did you discuss this statement with Mr. Depp before making the statement?
On same grounds.
Yeah, I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss the statement with Mr. Depp after making the statement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware, either before or after, that you were making this statement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Did you make this statement with Mr. Depp's authorization or agreement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware that you were speaking with the press?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp ever ask you to retract or correct this statement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had asked you to retract or correct this statement, would you have retracted or corrected it?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had told you that the statement was not correct, would you have corrected or retracted it?
Same instruction, same grounds.
I accept the instruction.
Did you rely upon any statements or evidence from Mr. Depp in making this statement?
Same instruction, same grounds.
Yes, I accept the instruction.
And if you could bring up exhibit number 5. Mr. Waldman, I'm going to be asking you a question about a specific statement in this one. If you would like to read the article first, you are certainly at liberty to, and you could take control now and do that.
Thank you, I will.
It says, this is, I guess, I didn't set the stage here. This was the Daily Mail published on July 3rd, 2020. And I'm going to now direct your attention to page 9. Depp's lawyer, Adam Waldman, said the various discrepancies prove that nothing heard and her friend said about the events of May 21, 2016 could be considered credible. Do you see that?
You're set.
Then I'm going to direct your attention, Mr. Waldman, to the next statement. Quote, quite simply, this was an ambush, a hoax. They set Mr. Depp up by calling the cops, but the first attempt didn't do the trick. The officers came to the penthouses, thoroughly searched and interviewed, and left after seeing no damage to face or property. So Amber and her friends spilled a little wine and roughed the place up, got their story straight under the direction of a lawyer and a publicist, and then placed a second call to 911. Do you see that statement?
I do.
Did you make those statements?
There are two parts to what you've shown me. The first part didn't have quotation marks around it.
And I'm not asking about that. I'm sorry.
Where it said nothing could be considered credible, that's not quoting me. The part with the quote marks, I believe I said that, yes.
So starting from quite simply through (911), you stated all that. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Did you make these statements on Mr. Depp's behalf?
Instruct the witness not to answer on the grounds of attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you make these statements?
Same instruction, same reason.
I accept the instruction.
What were you trying to convey to the press in making these statements?
Same instruction, same reason.
I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss this statement with Mr. Depp before making these statements?
Same instruction, same reason.
I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss these statements with Mr. Depp following making these statements?
Same instruction, same rationale.
Yes, I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware either before or after that you were making these statements?
Same instruction, same reason.
I accept the instruction.
Did you make these statements with Mr. Depp's authorization or agreement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware you were speaking with the press?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp ever ask you to retract or correct these statements?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had asked you to retract or correct these statements, would you have retracted or corrected them?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had told you these statements were not correct, would you have corrected or retracted them?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you rely upon any statements or evidence from Mr. Depp in making these statements?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at exhibit number 6. This was another Daily Mail online, July 3, 2020. And if you would like to go ahead and read the article, this would be a good time to do it.
Thank you.
Mr. Waldman, we were looking at Waldman exhibit number 6, and it's the Daily Mail from July, just lost her there, but July 3rd, 2020, and you were going to scroll through it, and I think we had some technical difficulties, so we took a break. Have you had an opportunity to review it, or do you need to now?
No, Ms. Bredoff, I just saw the screen for the first time, so may I read it now?
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you to turn to what is the 11th page, the last page you just finished reading, and I'm going to direct your attention to some specific words that are attributed to you. Do you see that it says Depp's attorney Adam Waldman said? Okay. You see Depp's attorney Adam Waldman said. Do you see that there, Mr. Waldman?
I do.
Okay. And then I'm going to direct your attention to specifically the end of Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp. Do you see that?
I do.
Did you speak the words, quote, the end of Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp?
I'm not sure. It appears as I look at this that there are quote marks around the statement, and that suggests that I did. I don't remember saying these particular words, but it appears so.
Do you have any reason to believe that you did not say the end of Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Ms. Johnny Depp?
No, I have no reason to doubt that.
Were you representing Mr. Depp at the time you made this statement? I'm going to refer to it as a statement. I'm taking specific words, Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp. But were you representing Mr. Depp at the time you made the statement that included Ms. Heard's abuse hoax against Johnny Depp?
Instruct the witness not to answer based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
Why did you make this statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
What were you trying to convey to the press in making this statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you make the statement on Mr. Depp's behalf?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss this statement with Mr. Depp before making the statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you discuss this statement with Mr. Depp following making the statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware either before or after that you were making this statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did you make this statement with Mr. Depp's authorization or agreement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Was Mr. Depp aware you were speaking with the press?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Did Mr. Depp ever ask you to retract or correct this statement?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
If Mr. Depp had asked you to retract or correct this statement, would you have done so?
Same instruction, same basis.
I accept the instruction.
Mr. Waldman, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 11, and if you want to take a moment, I'm going to try to make it. Mr. Waldman, I'm just going to ask you, it's just kind of 2.5 pages. Go ahead and take the moment to review it, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I've read it.
Okay. So directing your attention to exhibit number 11. So, because there's a number of these, so maybe we can just clear it up right from the start. So we have conversation. If you look at the top, conversation, 6 messages, 3 parties, over 209 minutes. And it has this first one, it has a date and a time, and it has a telephone number. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And then it has some email messages, or text messages. It looks like it starts with Keith Bishop. Do you know who Keith Bishop is?
I do.
And who is he?
Keith Bishop is a publicist who lives in London.
And for what publication?
Oh no, he's a publicist, he's an advisor on media.
I see. Did you, at any time, did you or Mr. Depp ever employ Keith Bishop in any kind of public relations role?
Mr. Waltman, I would instruct you not to answer any, I would instruct you not to answer the question to the extent that it would require you to disclose any communications you had with Johnny, either receiving or giving.
I would not be able to answer without doing so, so I accept the instruction.
Okay, and then Mr. Bishop says, and this is on 1/28/2020, Adam, I can confirm a meeting with the Mail Online for Monday, 17th February, 10 a.m. You see that?
I do.
So did you, in fact, have a meeting with the Mail Online on 17th February?
I couldn't say sitting here now definitively that we met on Monday the 17th of February, no. But I see this and it wouldn't surprise me if we had.
And was Mr. Depp with you when you had the meeting?
I believe Mr. Depp was with me when we had this meeting.
And you were representing Mr. Depp at the time, correct?
I would instruct the witness not to answer that question based on attorney-client privilege.
I accept the instruction.
When did you obtain the audio tape that you're referencing in this text message?
And I would instruct you not to answer the question to the extent it would require you to disclose any communications you had with Mr. Depp, your client.
It would, and so I won't be able to answer the question.
What tape did you provide to the Mail online, the Daily Mail?
In this, are you asking, forgive me, in this instance relating to this text?
Yes.
My recollection is that I gave a pair of audio tapes, actually, to them. Whether that occurred sequentially or at the same time, I don't remember, but I provided them 2 tapes.
What training have you had in domestic violence?
None.
Have you ever represented any clients who have either been accused of domestic violence or had domestic violence committed on them other than Mr. Depp?
No.
And of course, you never saw any, as you would say, element or elements of things that Ms. Heard claimed, right?
I never saw any element or elements of things she claimed. Do you mean, did I ever see evidence with my own eyes that something she was saying was false?
Yes.
Yes, to some extent I have seen evidence of things that show her statements to be false.
Before we get there, as best you can recall today, who are the eyewitnesses that you, among the 29 or so that you referred to in the text to Christian Carino, that you believe disprove Ms. Heard's claims of abuse by Johnny Depp?
Okay, good. It's also probably easier to answer by taking a particular incident rather than just thinking of names of people. So maybe this is a good illustration that is a helpful answer. On May 21st, 2016, and I always view this as one of her central claims. It was the one she put on the cover of People magazine. It's the one she led with when she went to get her temporary restraining order. The phone to the face incident on May 21st, 2016. That's her claim, and that she was further beaten by some appendage of Mr. Depp in the face, and her hair was pulled. And she showed up on the 27th in court with a lot of bruises on her face. So there are 2 police officers, one domestic violence trained female police officer, who've testified over and over and over that there was no damage to the penthouse, which Ms. Heard claimed was destroyed. That's a direct quote, destroyed. There are, I can think of, 9 other witnesses, the majority of whom are either neutral or actually Ms. Heard's own witnesses, who have testified in various forums, various times, that there were no injuries to her face whatsoever between the 21st and the 27th, when suddenly there were bruises.
Who are those 9?
Let's see. Laura Divineer, Melanie Inglesi, Amber's own primary makeup artist. Laura Divineer was Ms. Heard's assistant and decorator, and now works for Elon Musk. Hilda Vargas, Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's at the time housekeeper. Samantha McMillan, who was Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp's stylist, a good friend of Ms. Heard's. Isaac Baruch, Ms. Heard's and Mr. Depp's friend, close friend, and Ms. Heard's neighbor in the penthouses. Okay, so continuing on, the witnesses, a list of some witnesses to the 21st, her claims of violence and damage to the apartment. Trinity Esparza, who was the head of the concierge desk at the Eastern Columbia building, and a friend of Ms. Heard's also. Cornelius Harrell, who I think also worked for the concierge desk, or in any event worked for the Eastern Columbia building, and met with Ms. Heard on the 22nd of May, which meeting was captured on CCTV also. Alejandro Romero, who I believe is head of security at the Eastern Columbia building. And I think Brandon Patterson also testified about the absence of bruises. And I should even distinguish, because we're talking about the notion of a hoax, I should distinguish these people specifically have given testimony that Ms. Heard was uninjured between the 21st of May up into perhaps the 25th or 26th of May. And then, of course, she appeared bruised again on the 27th. Some of them have testified that even after the 27th, they were with her and she appeared and that she appeared bruised. But during that period between the 21st and the 27th, I'm not sure if I've listed 9 plus the 2 police officers, but I think that's an illustration of what I was referring to when in the question you asked me about.
Can you please pull up the document labeled ARW 660, please? Sorry, but you do believe that the pictures and videos Marilyn Manson sent you helped disprove Ms. Heard's allegations, correct?
As to that incident, Thanksgiving, perhaps 2013, I think those videos and photographs, yes, demolished her claim.
Have you communicated with other social media users about this case other than public messaging platforms? Let me ask that differently. Have you communicated privately with other social media users about this case?
Other social media, I want to make sure I'm precise. Other social media users?
Yes.
That group would include almost everybody on Earth.
Have you provided information about this case to other social media personalities who then post that information?
I've provided information episodically to what I would call internet journalists, and I'll define that as journalists who are not affiliated with, you mentioned, I think, NBC a moment ago, or a mainstream media outlet.
Have you communicated with a social media user who goes by the name That Umbrella Guy?
I've had several phone calls with the person who goes by the name That Umbrella Guy. I don't actually know his real name.
Have you communicated with him other than through phone calls?
I don't remember doing so, no.
What are other, well, let me ask you this. Have you communicated in a similar fashion with someone on social media who goes by the name That Brian fella?
Yes.
What about someone who goes by the name The Real Laura B?
Yes.
And have you communicated to those individuals listed evidence that you believe suggests that Ms. Heard's allegations are hoaxes?
I would say I communicate with the internet journalists, because we put them in a category calling them that. I've done that. Exactly the same way I would communicate with mainstream media. If they have questions about evidence or the facts, I'll inform them.
And have you, when you communicate with them, do you do so? You testified some by phone, correct?
Yes.
Do you do so by text or messenger platform?
Largely, I think by phone, but if I communicated in writing, it would be probably by signal.
Can you please pull up the exhibits ALH 17001 to 2, please?
Showing on the screen, exhibit 24.
No, my question, well, my first question is that in that box where it says first on the record statement from me regarding the body cam to RTL, Adam Waldman, Johnny Depp's attorney, is that a statement that you made to a German media outlet called RTL?
Yes.
And in that statement, you say that LAPD have now opened up a criminal investigation into perjury of Ms. Heard, correct?
Yes.
Did you make a correction to RTL when you learned that the LAPD wasn't in fact investigating Ms. Heard for perjury?
Well, the way you characterize it is not exactly what I would agree with. The LAPD told me that they were investigating the perjury claim at that time. Then sequentially came the statement. Then came notification from the LAPD that it was actually the LA Sheriff's Department that was investigating it, and that was the last I heard about it.
And who notified you from the LAPD that it was allegedly the Sheriff's Department who was investigating it?
The same desk officer at Foothill. And when I say he's the desk officer, I don't know if that's not necessarily the job title.
How did you find his, do you have his contact information?
I don't think I do. I don't know, but I don't, well, I'm not sure.
And I'm sorry if I asked you this. How did you come into contact with this desk officer?
I brought a binder of information, including the statements that had been made and the evidence showing that those statements were false.
In your view? So you took a binder to the LAPD and spoke to this desk officer?
Correct.
And was that the only time that you spoke to this person?
The 2 times.
Were they both in person?
Oh, maybe it's 2 or 3 times. No, 2 times we're on the phone.
Was the first meeting in person when you brought this binder?
No, the first was on the telephone.
So the investigation was opened up at your request after you brought this binder to the desk officer? Is that right?
I didn't ask him to open an investigation. I filed a claim with the LAPD regarding these perjurious statements that Ms. Heard and her best friend Rocky Pennington had made to a court.
Was that claim that you filed in writing?
Yes.
Do you know whether that claim was produced as part of your document production in this case? Because I certainly haven't seen it.
I don't know that I ever received a copy of it. It was filed in writing with the LAPD. But I don't recall that I ever received a copy of it.
Did you draft it?
No.
So you were talking to the desk officer and he was taking down notes, and is that the writing you were referring to?
Yes.
Did you ever see this alleged written claim?
Yes.
Did you sign it?
I don't recall if I did.
Did you ever speak to anyone other than your client about this alleged perjury investigation, other than your client and the desk officer?
Well, I think this quote that you've shown me to the media would constitute speaking about it.
Did you ever hear anything more about this perjury investigation to the extent it exists at the LA Sheriff's Office?
No, I don't think so.
Mr. Waldman, do you have a professional license?
I do.
Do you have your own law firm?
I do.
What is the name of your law firm?
Endeavor Law Firm.
When was Endeavor Law Firm formed?
I think it was in 2005.
And who was it who formed your law firm?
It was I who did it.
And who owns your law firm?
I do.
What is your title at the Endeavor Law Firm?
Managing member, I believe.
And it's none of our business who your clients are, but does the Endeavor Law Firm have other clients other than Mr. Depp?
Yes.
Does Johnny Depp issue you a Form W-2?
I don't think so, no.
Do you receive legal training from Johnny Depp or any of your other clients?
I suppose the practice of law in general is legal training, but if I understand your question correctly, no.
Fair point. Have you ever listed Johnny Depp as your employer on any filings with the IRS?
No.
But you offer legal services to clients, correct?
Yes.
All right, I'll say, do you offer legal services to the general public?
Probably not to the general public, but I offer legal services. I think that's your question.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, our next one would be Detective Sandanaga, Sandanaga. It's about 20 minutes.
All right, let's go ahead and
Okay.
have that witness. Is that, and go ahead.
We start the question.
All right, thank you.
State your name and business address for the record, please.
Marie Sadanaga, Marie, Sadanaga, Sadanaga. And my business address is 100 West 1st Street, Los Angeles, California.
And what is your current occupation?
I am a detective with the Los Angeles Police Department, and I am the department's domestic violence coordinator.
What does it mean to be the domestic violence coordinator for the department?
So I am recognized as the person most knowledgeable in domestic violence. I oversee how our department as a whole responds to domestic violence. So I don't investigate cases right now myself. I just make sure that officers and detectives are responding to domestic violence how California State Penal Code wants us.
And how long have you been with the LAPD?
17 years.
What, if any, policies, procedures, and protocols are in place at the LAPD for domestic violence cases separate from other types?
So once we determine there is domestic violence, we have to determine whether there is a crime. Every time we respond to a domestic violence call, per state law, we need to document whether it's a crime or just an incident, which would be when there is not a crime, but there's still paperwork done. So that is part of the officer's investigation.
Now, I had asked a little earlier about when the victim is reluctant to press charges. If the patrol officers saw property damage or marks on the face of the victim, even if the victim was not cooperating and did not want to press charges, what would the patrol officers' obligations be back in May 2016 on a domestic violence call?
If officers determined that there was domestic violence, even if a victim is reluctant, our policy is they still make that arrest if the suspect is there or take a report.
So if there are, when the patrol officers arrive at the scene, and this is May 2016, and there are 4 people that are present at the scene, how many of those individuals are the patrol officers obligated to interview? So I'm going to show you the incident call here, and it goes down and it has domestic dispute, and then it says, met with victim, looks like check location, verified husband left, victim advised verbal dispute, and refused to give any further information, issued business card. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. In May of 2016, was the language victim advised verbal dispute language that patrol officers were trained to provide when they were not going to document anything from the scene?
It can vary, but officers would commonly use the phrase verbal dispute or to document when a report was not taken.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 8. It's dated November 24, 2014. And it's subject domestic violence supplemental report. And it says the domestic violence supplemental report form 15.40.02 has been revised to provide a more concise picture of the history and needs of the victim for the purpose of investigating the crime of domestic violence. Do you see that?
Yes.
What is your understanding of why the LAPD decided that they needed to create a supplemental report form that would give a more concise picture of the history and needs of the victim for the purpose of investigating the crime of domestic violence?
Right. The supplemental includes a lot of questions that are required by California state law. So we included that on it. And the original supplemental was actually created a lot earlier, I believe in 1999. This revision of it added some specific questions to help us look at kind of to do a risk assessment. I'm not sure if the supplemental is attached to this form, but on the supplemental, there's a section where I believe there's like 7 yes or no questions. That is what was added during this revision.
Detective Sadnaga, I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition exhibit number 9. And do you recognize this supplemental report?
Yes.
Is this the supplemental form that was referred to in exhibit number 8?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we look at this, and we start out on the left-hand column, and it has a number of different observations to make of the victim. And it includes shaking, unresponsive, crying, scared, angry, fearful, calm, agitated, nervous, threatening, apologetic, under the influence of alcohol, under the influence of drugs, or other observations. And it says document in narrative. All right. Are these typically characteristics of victims of domestic violence?
Yes.
I'm going to turn your direction to the crime scene now. In the same question, there's a number of different items on here, including location, vandalized, ransacked, and personal property damage, furniture disarray, broken. What is your understanding of why these are included on this list?
My understanding is that these are things that are typically at a crime scene or can occur, so things that we want officers to look for and mark when they take the crime report.
And as with the questions I had on the characteristics that are on the list for the victims, are these items that are also discussed with the police officers in their training to look for in even making the determination whether a crime has taken place?
Yes, they are.
Is there a scenario under which the patrol officers decide that there's no crime, but they see property damage and injury and take photographs?
I mean, every situation is different. I believe one way, if we have a situation like that occurred, then there should be a domestic violence incident report. So there is a place to document your observations and statements from people, and a reason to have those photographs.
Even if ultimately the officers determined that it wasn't a crime.
And yes, that's why domestic violence incident reports are reports where there are no crime, and that is why we have them, so we can document and have a history of calls and see, in case there is another call in the future, that there is prior history of any type of domestic call, even if it was not ultimately ruled a crime.
Would that incident report include if there were interviews with witnesses and if there were any photographs or notes taken?
Yes, there is still a narrative that is written where everything, the officer's investigation and observations and any photographs are listed.
And was there an incident report in place in May of 2016 for patrol officers to use in domestic violence calls?
Yes.
Could you please describe the purpose of an incident report as of May 2016 and what was included typically in an incident report?
So the purpose of domestic violence incident reports were to record when officers responded to a call of domestic violence that did not result in a crime. They are actually required by state law for us to document every domestic violence incident that we respond to. And in that report, it's the same. I keep calling it a face sheet. That's not the official term, but the same as a crime report that we would take it on, but you fill out the information. You just do not list a suspect because we have no crime. It's the victim who was in fear that the other party may cause some type of danger to them, and that other party is then listed as a witness. And then there is a narrative that is included, the same type of narrative that would be in a crime report, where you would write down your source of activity. The officers would put their source of activity and then document their investigation. The statements that anyone made, as we ask on domestic violence calls, what type of relationship it is, how long they've been together, any prior incidents of domestic violence, all that would be included in the narrative of an incident report.
And would any photographs or other notes also be included in that incident report?
Yes, they can be, if there was anything that they saw that officers believe needed to be documented in there.
And where would an incident report, and I'm again back in May 2016, where would that be filed or stored once the patrol officers were done with their shift for the day?
The officers would turn in their reports, including any incident reports, to the watch commander, who would read over it and sign it off. And if it is approved, it would go to our records unit at that division to create a report number on it. And then it does get assigned to a detective, just so that we have it on file in case there's any future incidents.
Do officers at some point have to make a determination as to whether domestic violence has occurred?
Yes, they do.
Okay. What criteria do officers use to make that evaluation?
They use the interviews with the parties that are there, what they observe at the scene, even what they observe, like the demeanor of the victims and the suspects. Every situation is different, but it's really like taking in the whole the whole 360 of where you are and what's occurred, so they can get all information to make that educated determination of the crime that's occurred.
Can you just generally describe for me the circumstances under which a domestic incident report is used?
We take a incident report when we determine there is no crime, but that one of the parties is in fear that their life was in danger, or they could be a victim of some type of serious bodily injury. So the third incidents you would have, or where we don't take the incident report, is where both parties state it was an argument, there was no physical injury, both parties say we weren't afraid that the other was going to do any type of harm to me.
Okay. And so in that case, in that third case that you just described, would there be any documentation required typically?
On that third one, when we don't have the fear, so it makes it no incident report, it's only documented on that daily field activity report.
Ms. Brennehoff asked a line of questions earlier on in the deposition about victims of domestic violence being reluctant to come forward and speak up. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Is that a significant problem in dealing with domestic violence calls?
Yes.
Is that a problem that you have personally experienced on your own calls?
Yes.
Okay. When confronted with a person who's unwilling to make a statement, is there much that a police officer can really do if you have somebody who just refuses to make a statement and refuses to indicate that they have suffered violent abuse?
It's not too much. Usually we teach them to talk about the cycle of violence and power and control, and see if we can start a rapport with the victim and get them to discuss. But if they really don't want to tell us what happened, we can't force them.
If a potential victim has visible injuries, or that there are indications at the scene that there has been some sort of violent episode, does the fact that the potential victim declines to make a statement mean that the officers can't go forward?
No, not necessarily. They would need to investigate more, but you do have the visible injury and evidence of some type of struggle, so they would need to try to get that probable cause to determine that it was a crime that created that injury.
There were a number of questions asked about if observed injury, if observed property damage, back and forth, and both of us have asked you a lot of questions about this. And so I just want to make sure that it's very clear. If a police officer responding to a domestic violence call sees injury, regardless of whether the victim cooperates, what is the police officer's obligation? This is as of May 2016.
To do an investigation to determine if that injury was a result of a crime.
And that investigation would include what?
It would include interviewing anyone that is at scene, seeing if there's any type of physical evidence of altercation, or depending on the story that was given, if there's corroboration of that, seeing if there's any witnesses. kind of depends. Each one's different, but just doing a thorough investigation.
If one of the other witnesses took the officers through the entire premises and showed broken glass, spilled wine, and a number of areas of disturbance and vandalism, what would the officers' obligations be then?
The officers would still need to determine if there was enough evidence there from these witness statements and the things that they're seeing to determine if this injury is a result of a crime.
What discretion do the police officers have when they see an injury on the victim when they report it to a domestic violence call? And this is as of May 2016.
The officers still need to do an investigation if there is a visible injury because they have to determine if it was a crime.
So one of your roles, if I understand it, is to make a determination of that the police, the LAPD as a whole, how you're overseeing how they respond to domestic violence calls, correct?
Leading.
Yes. And let me ask it just a little bit differently. In making the determination of whether to create an incident report, what, if any, factors can the officer consider if the victim does not want to press charges, but the officer still believes that an incident report is appropriate under the circumstances?
It would, if an officer determines that there was not a crime, yet there was enough there, and I guess what I'm trying to say, I mean, the purpose we have to think about, that we tell the officers the purpose of domestic violence incident report is for documentation of incidents, because we know with domestic violence there's usually a series of incidents that happen, and not all of those are crimes. So for us as officers, we document those so in the future, if there is a crime, we can go back and say there have been all these other incidents. So as officers, we kind of take that into our analysis of the scene, and if we can't determine whether a crime has happened, we have to think about, do we need to document this so maybe sometime in the future people know that this happened?
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take our lunch break at this time. Again, do not do any outside research and do not discuss the case with anybody, okay? We'll see you back in an hour. All right, so we'll be back at 1:45. Is your next witness on a deposition, or it's going to be live? All right, so we'll take care of it. Jury? Okay. All right, thank you. You be seated. All right. Your next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Heard, you've testified repeatedly that you were concerned about Mr. Depp's substance use during your relationship, right?
Yes, that's correct.
But you weren't concerned enough to stop using drugs and alcohol yourself, were you?
I did not use drugs when I was with Johnny, like in his presence, aside from the times I testified about with you.
So you weren't concerned enough to stop using drugs and alcohol the times you testified to in front of the jury, right?
As I testified to earlier, I took drugs in Johnny's presence on those 2 occasions, early in our relationship in 2013.
So you never changed your own behavior to support Mr. Depp and his sobriety, did you?
I did a lot of changing to support his sobriety. I tried everything that I could possibly think of.
But you drank wine around Mr. Depp on a regular basis, correct?
I did drink wine.
And you took Mr. Depp to Hicksville to do, quote, laughy drugs like mushrooms, end quote, right?
That's correct.
And you testified that despite what supposedly happened in Hicksville, you decided to take MDMA with Mr. Depp on a plane to Russia in June of 2013, correct?
As I mentioned, those are the 2 occasions.
You testified that this was the last time you would make that mistake, right?
That is correct.
And when asked if you would ask Mr. Depp to get you MDMA in Australia, you said that was, quote, ridiculous, right?
That is correct.
Because you had learned your lesson the hard way on the plane to Russia.
Russia, yes, that's correct.
Yours and Mr. Depp's wedding in the Bahamas was in February of 2015, right?
That is correct.
So that would have been after the Russia flight.
Yes, when I did, when we had mushrooms on the island for my hen party, my wet bridal party before. We were not with Johnny. I was not with Johnny at the time.
It was your wedding with Mr. Depp on the island, right?
To be clear, we were both on the same island. We just weren't around each other that evening. We had kind of separate parties, a bridal party and a groom's party.
And your wedding was a month before Australia, correct?
That is correct.
And you arranged to have drugs at your wedding, correct?
Like I said, we had mushrooms for my bridal party beforehand.
On the island for your wedding?
Before the wedding.
On the island?
On the island, yes.
Can we please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 1262? This is an email you sent on February 1st, 2015, correct?
That is correct. Yes, that's correct.
I'm going to move to admit and publish Plaintiff's Exhibit 1262.
Any objection? Yeah, sure.
Your Honor, if we could please have Ms. Heard's email published to the jury.
All right, 1262 in evidence.
This is a schedule for your wedding weekend, right, Ms. Heard?
No, it's not. It's a proposed draft of a schedule. It ended up being quite different.
Do you see where it says 7 p.m. rehearsal dinner?
Yes, I see that.
And the next item on the list says, quote, after dance party and drugs and music, end quote, right?
That is correct.
So you plan to have drugs at your wedding to someone you characterize as a drug addict?
To be fair, we were going to have separate parties, as I mentioned. So a bridal party before this, the schedule ended up changing quite a bit. And this is a draft clearly that was sent before there were a lot of changes made. The bridal party.
So your original
and the
idea,
previous
Ms.
party were
Heard,
separate.
Ms. Heard, your original idea was to have a rehearsal dinner with your husband, the drug addict, the monster, and then do drugs with your girlfriends on the island after your rehearsal dinner?
I realize that's what the email suggests, but that wasn't.
No, it's not what it suggests, Ms. Heard. It's what you said in that email.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is that the schedule ended up changing. We ended up doing the little.
So your original
as I call
idea
it,
was
cuddle
to do
cuddle
drugs.
before.
Yeah, your original idea was to do drugs on an island after your rehearsal dinner to the drug-fueled monster that you were about to marry, right?
The as the email suggests, there was going to be weed on the island. This does not reference the cuddle puddle that I just referenced to you.
You like to do drugs on special occasions, right, Ms. Heard?
I have before.
And you did drugs again for your 30th birthday, right?
That is correct. That was a huge mistake.
Your 30th birthday dinner was on April 21st, 2016?
Yes, it was the day before my birthday, correct.
And you testified that Mr. Depp was running late to the celebration, correct?
That is correct.
And you asked Mr. Depp to bring you alcohol when he arrived, is that right?
So the utility closet where we kept the wine was right by the elevators, and I also told him he could bring in a joint. I wouldn't bite his head off if he did.
So that's a yes?
That's correct. I told him I wouldn't be angry.
Let's look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 1263.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask to show, first of all, this one hasn't been produced. This is not, it's a brand new trial exhibit, so I don't have it. I'd like an unredacted copy, and then I'd like an unredacted copy to be shown to the witness.
All right, do you have an unredacted copy?
We can make one, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, may we approach about this? I'm going to show the unredacted messages to counsel for Ms. Heard on the laptop because I don't have a hard copy.
Okay.
Could we, let's pause for a minute. I don't want to see.
What's that?
So, Ms. Heard, I'm only going to...
Your Honor, I'm going to object to asking questions while I'm looking at this.
All right, if you could give her a moment, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm having trouble seeing this. Can you? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So, any objection to 1263 as redacted?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 1263 in evidence.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Heard, directing your attention to the Plaintiff's Exhibit 1263. This is a text message that you sent to Mr. Depp, correct?
That is correct.
And you sent this message to Mr. Depp the day you had your 30th birthday dinner, right?
That is correct.
And you write, quote, "Hey baby, bring up something to drink and or a joint. I'm in if you are. See you in a minute. Question mark. XX." Did I read that right?
That is correct.
And then the next day you went to Coachella and consumed MDMA and mushrooms, right, Ms. Heard?
I did. Johnny was not there for that.
Right. Let's talk a little bit more about your 30th birthday. You testified about this incident multiple times, haven't you?
That is correct.
But yesterday you told this jury that you were not called upon to provide a detailed accounting of all physical and sexual abuse by Mr. Depp until February 2020. Is that correct?
I testified that I had not been able to do so until February 2020 in outside of the context of a cold deposition.
Actually, I misspoke. February 2022, this year.
Right. Sorry, I did the same thing you did.
Okay. And you did that in something called an interrogatory. Is that correct?
The interrogatory response was the first time that I could do that outside of the context of being asked certain questions in the deposition.
And you testified about your 30th birthday in this interrogatory, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Nonetheless, you testified to a new detail about your 30th birthday for the first time in this courtroom, didn't you?
No, that's incorrect.
A sexual assault, no less.
I had just not placed when that happened. I was never sure if that was the same time that he did that on the night of my birthday. And I maintained that as well in my deposition.
You told this jury that the evening of your 30th birthday dinner, Mr. Depp, quote, grabbed you by the pubic area, end quote, and quote, pushed you down, right?
That is correct.
This detail isn't in your interrogatory response, is it, Ms. Heard?
That detail is in my interrogatory response, yes.
Let's pull up your interrogatory response. If we could please bring up Ms. Bredehoff. Thank you. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we can go to your interrogatory responses at page 57. These are signed under the penalty of perjury, correct?
That is correct.
And you testified again to this jury that this was the first time you were given an opportunity to write down everything and include all your evidence, right?
That is correct.
Okay. So let's go to page 57. At the top of page 57, Johnny and I were not in a good place. I begged him to make my birthday dinner. Do you see that?
That is correct.
Okay, so starting on page 57, you start describing your birthday dinner, correct?
That is correct.
All right. On page 59 of your interrogatory response, you write, fourth paragraph down, Johnny grabbed me while holding me down, and I remember him asking me if I thought I was so tough. He asked me 3-4 times up close to my face, "You're so tough. Are you such a tough guy, huh? You think you're so tough. What are you going to do now?" I stood up at some point after getting off the ground. Do you see that?
That is correct.
And then you write after, I remember crying. I remember feeling exhausted and frustrated. And it hit me, meaning the realization of how sad it was that I was going to wake up tomorrow on my birthday without him.
That's correct.
Where in this interrogatory response, Ms. Heard, you describe Mr. Depp, quote, grabbing you by the pubic bone, pubic area, and pushing you down?
On page 64.
Where?
Page 64, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs down. Johnny grabbed me once, did this taunting thing on the side of the bed in penthouse 3. He grabbed my vagina and held me there. Asked me if I was so tough.
You're not describing what happened after your 30th birthday?
I am. I just had not prescribed it to that date with the limited evidence I had at the time. Only in the course of looking at the evidence, preparing for this case, have I put those two pieces together. But I've always said what happened.
You were upset that Mr. Depp was late to your 30th birthday, weren't you?
I was.
You knew Mr. Depp had a scheduled business meeting or a money meeting that evening, right?
No, I knew he said he did. I didn't know if he had one. Addicts lie all the time.
So you didn't trust him?
I took it with a big grain of addict salt.
Okay. And Mr. Depp texted you that evening to let you know he'd be late, correct?
Yes, he did text me at some point.
It was a big deal to you that Mr. Depp was late to your birthday dinner, wasn't it?
Yeah, it did matter to me.
And you were upset he was late.
I was hurt.
And when he finally did arrive, you felt, quote, invisible to him, right?
I did.
The day after your birthday dinner, you and your friends went to Coachella to celebrate your birthday. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You made a video driving to Coachella with your friends, didn't you?
That is correct.
I'd like to pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 1264. And for the record, Your Honor, this only has music without any words on it.
And again, it's a new one, so I'd like a copy of it.
It's going to be played. There is no sound other than a song.
Yes, sir.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right. If we could please publish this to the jury
Evidence? Yes,
with a sound. This is the video you made when you drove to Coachella with your friends for your 30th birthday, right?
That's correct. I'm not quite sure which one of us made the video, but that's correct.
You're featured in that video driving.
That's correct.
And it's set to the song Miss You by the Rolling Stones. Is that right?
That's correct.
That was a message for Mr. Depp, wasn't it?
No, that's ridiculous.
You consumed drugs at Coachella, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
You took MDMA and mushrooms at the same time.
I did, yes.
And it made you feel sick, right?
I felt horrible, yes.
So you left Coachella.
Yes, that's correct.
You testified yesterday that when you left Coachella, you left with, quote, your entire group.
That is correct.
And you were, quote, never alone with Starling, right?
That is correct.
You weren't anywhere near him.
Not alone, no.
You sat here when Starling Jenkins testified that he collected you from Coachella when you were sick, right?
He picked up my entire group.
And Mr. Jenkins testified, quote, I collected her, got her in the vehicle. She didn't want anyone else to know that she was sick. Take her back to the Parker, which I assume was in reference to the hotel, alone. I took her to the 7-Eleven where I retrieved hydrating fluids, Advil, and let her have those. Got her back up to the Parker, got her in the suite, and then went back to pick up everyone else. You were there when Mr. Jenkins testified, right?
Yes, he was wrong.
So it's your testimony that Mr. Jenkins is lying.
He's just wrong. I don't know what his intentions are. He was just wrong about that. We were a big group of us. I wasn't alone with him.
Isn't it possible that you don't remember correctly because you were sick from taking MDMA and mushrooms at the same time?
I remember everything about that night.
Okay. I'd like to play for you Plaintiff's Exhibit 1229, which is already in evidence, at 1720 through 2128.
Coachella without fucking talking to me because I left you because you were fucking haymakered me, man. You came around the bed and fucking started punching on me. Why? I love you.
That's what really happened the evening of your 30th birthday, isn't it, Miss Heard?
No, that's incorrect.
Mr. Depp was in bed, and then you came around the bed and started punching him.
That's incorrect.
You don't deny that in the recording, do you, Miss Heard?
I'm not having that conversation with Johnny. I'm not denying anything. I'm not saying anything. I'm not having that conversation with Johnny. I was trying to get out of that hotel room. That was a mediation attempt. That was the recording you just heard. It was us meeting in a hotel.
But you're talking about your 30th birthday.
No, we're not.
You're not talking about going to Coachella and...
Johnny's talking about that. I am not arguing with him about any of that.
Right. You don't deny anything, do you?
I'm not talking to him about that.
I'm going to publish exhibit, or ask that the witness be shown exhibit 1265. you and your friends at Coachella, correct?
That is correct.
I'm going to move to admit plaintiffs 1265 and publish it.
No objection.
All right, 1265 in evidence, you can publish it.
There's no injuries to you, are there, Ms. Heard, visible in this picture?
You cannot see any visible injury, no.
Thank you, Tom. Ms. Heard, you remember during Mr. Depp's examination, a number of recordings were played, correct?
That's correct.
And in one of those recordings, you told Mr. Depp, quote, "I hope to God Jack's stepfather teaches him more about being a man than your fucking left nut," end quote. Do you remember that?
I do not remember what exactly I could hear of that recording. I remember I heard myself make a mention of Jack's new stepfather or potential stepfather. I can't recall.
Jack is Mr. Depp's son, right?
That is correct. And I believe I was referencing a marriage that his ex-partner was going to have or getting into, I suppose.
You were referencing that Jack's new stepfather would teach him how to be a man because Mr. Depp couldn't.
I don't recall exactly what I said, but it was something to that effect.
Let's listen to some of what happened before you said that to Mr. Depp. If we could please play Plaintiff's Exhibit 397, which is already in evidence. And for the record, it's at 3504 through 3547. And then the next clip is 3635 through 4308.
Fucking stop it. You're always
Everything's fine until it doesn't go your way. And when it doesn't go your way, I'm in trouble. And you know what? I don't need you. I don't want your kind of woman. I don't want your kind of woman. I don't want your kind of woman. I'm my kind. So my dick is yours.
mistake. I wish I had fucking had him. I wish I fucking had him. I wish I fucking hadn't bought into any of your fucking lies, your bullshit, your sober fucking presence, your fucking goodness, your sweetness, all the lies. I wish I hadn't bought into the months of you being you. I wish I hadn't bought into the promises. I wish I hadn't fucking thought I could have kids with you. You're a fucking kid yourself. I wish I hadn't bought into any of the lies you sold. Talk about fake bill of goods. You're the biggest fucking, you're the biggest fucking seller of fake fucking bill of goods. Talk about presenting yourself as something.
I did myself as a fake seller of goods. I fucking, you left nothing and I've left everything. So suck your dick.
Yeah, go on.
Which is probably your next move, because it's what you fucking move. No, I don't want to suck your dick. I don't want nothing to do with your fucking midsection. Well, go get it, man.
Because I need something. Go on. Fucking fuck yourself. No shit, I can't. Suck your dick.
I don't want to.
It's gonna be all you got.
No, it's not really true, Amber.
Actually, it's kind of is.
It kind of is? What are you talking about? You know what's Oh, is it? What is it?
No, I'm sure Rochelle's available. Call her up. I'm sure she's available.
Maybe she is.
I'm sure she is.
We'll see.
I'm sure she is.
I'll let you know.
Oh, I'm sure she is. For her yoga vlog.
That fake laugh is too much to take.
No, I'm sure she's.
That fake laugh is so disgusting.
I'm sure she's great. I'm sure she's great.
I'm thinking that you give me some of the best performances in the hour.
No, you're right. I don't. It's all about performance.
It's about performance for you. Right. I don't regret.
Oh, what else? What else that you do? Oh, come on.
Come
on. Lay it on funny. What else? What else other things do you want to add?
Can't talk
You
to me,
fucking
son.
lying piece of shit. What? Oh,
There's
no,
a
I
kid
want
show.
to know. I want to know.
Get out your Ubers out.
I'm kind of waiting. You go get it.
Yeah, I'll be in the
Wait, is there no other place for you to run your 15 other houses to go run? Come on, go be a real married man. Go deal with your shit the way that a man does. Go run to the next house. Every man does.
Yeah.
Go. Run away. I know it's hard to
Your
look at yourself.
fucking ridiculous plan. Your
hard.
panic fucking plan.
It's hard. It's hard.
Screwing everybody else
Poor
over to
thing.
get
You're
your
right,
fucking.
I tried.
thing
That's
with
what I
you.
do.
You're the most spoiled fucking brat. And you got everybody out here almost full, but it
you're
don't
right.
last long.
You're right.
I've
I'm
been here a lot
sorry.
longer
You're
than
right. You gotta
because
figure it out.
You don't have. Figure out what you have to offer as opposed to going out and get your tits out.
You're right. That's what I do.
Well, yeah. Let me deal with that.
You're right. You're
Excellent
right.
choice.
Back to that. Well, I wonder what we else. I wonder what else we can reach for in the last 60 minutes. Oh no, it was for your good. You're right. I'm sure there's other things you can.
Go laugh.
No, I'm not laughing.
No, matter of fact,
I'm
laugh
not
here.
laughing. I'm not. It's
Oh.
serious. I'm sure you can find other things.
I know. And stripping. Well, there's always that. You can
You're
always go
right. You
back
can
to
write
that
a book.
for
You can
another-
write a
for
book.
another
I
10
know you
minutes.
can write a book. Oh, is this gonna be good for your book? Oh, should I sign an NDA for your book?
You don't
Your book.
No,
Is this
no.
gonna be good for your book?
You won't even
Is this
make
gonna be
it.
good for your book?
I'll write what I want. I write what I want.
Idea.
I write what
How
I
about you
want.
sell more of your journals? You're not a sellout or anything. Let's sell your journals. Oh, wait.
Hey.
Hey, no,
Yeah,
you're not
you
one.
wanna sell out.
No, you're not
You
selling
don't want
out.
to sell out, Magic Mike. You don't
No,
wanna
yeah,
sell
'cause
out.
no one does
No.
21 drugs straight when they're in their 20s. No, you're right. That's not selling out. No. When you're in your 20s, you should really know what you want. Like
By the
selling
way-
your journals.
By the way, if you didn't know who the fuck I was.
You're right. Go sell your journals like a real nonsense. 55-year-old. Or, I'm sorry,
6.
51. I don't know. It doesn't matter at this point.
No.
I don't think so.
There we go.
I don't really think so. But you're right. I mean, hey, at least I didn't do like a TV show where I was heartbroken in my 20s. God, that would be like embarrassing.
Wow.
If only I was with someone in their 50s that could point that out to me. Magic Mike, you're right. When you play a non-sexualized object. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. You're right. You got me. You got it all figured out.
You don't even know what movies I've done.
If only you could
You haven't
like-
even taken an interest.
If only I could
You
be
know,
like
but I had to
you. If
watch
only
your
I
fucking-
could be like
I had to watch your fucking direct and you trying to like
You're a joke.
spew
You're
out
a
these fucking
joke.
lines.
You're a joke. You're a joke.
Yeah, I'm the joke in the industry, Amber. I'm the joke. I'm the joke in the
I'm sorry.
industry.
I can't really hear you. I'm sorry. The reruns of all my bullshit are playing too loud for me to hear you. I'm gonna just go and pedal my way back. Sorry. I can't hear you.
Aquaman.
Oh, 21 is whatever it was.
That was
Remember anymore.
that was 20.
No one cares. You're fucking fucking.
Washed up piece of shit. Washed up piece of shit.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Your jealousy's so tragic.
I'm sorry.
Your jealousy's so tragic. Fucking like
I can't hear you.
thinking that I'm going on a road with a
Turn on
band.
my- Hey, I can't hear you.
You told Mr. Depp to suck your dick multiple times, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
You tell him to go run to his 15 other houses, right?
That's correct.
Because that's what he would do when you behave like this, isn't it?
Eventually, he would go and stay in one of the other houses.
You call him a sellout, don't you?
I was expressing frustration about his criticism of my career and how many problems that caused within the dynamic of our relationship. Yes.
So you call him a sellout and a joke?
I called him horrible, ugly things, as you can hear. And
Sellout.
We spoke to each other in a really horrible way.
Pretty sure we just heard you speak to him in a really horrible way. You called him a sellout,
I just
right, Ms.
disagree.
Heard? You called him a sellout, right, Ms. Heard?
I called him a lot of ugly things.
And a joke.
I called him a lot of ugly things.
You called him a joke on that recording. You called him a washed up piece of shit.
I think we both called each other that on that occasion, yes.
Mr. Depp mentions Aquaman, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Mr. Depp got you that role in Aquaman, didn't he?
Excuse me?
Mr. Depp got you that role in Aquaman, didn't he?
No, Miss Vasquez, I got myself that role by auditioning. That's
Mr.
how that
Depp
works.
says, quote, your jealousy is so tragic.
I heard him say that, yes.
You were the jealous one in this relationship, weren't you, Miss Heard?
I think he was indicating I was jealous of his career.
But now you've twisted it to say it was Mr. Depp that's the jealous one.
Johnny's always been very jealous when I worked, when I did anything, friends. Yes, he's always been very jealous.
Ms. Heard, I'm going to ask you to take a look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 120E. This is a series of text messages between you and Mr. Depp.
That is correct.
I'm going to move to admit and publish these text messages. Mr. Depp's messages have been redacted.
All right, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 120E in evidence, you can publish.
Starts with a text message from you to Mr. Depp on September 26, 2015, right?
That is correct.
You write, monster is back. This is him. Did I read that right?
That is correct.
And then in the next message, you write, quote, ran away, first sign of trouble. This is not the man you promised you would be. Did I read that correctly?